listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and people who play it. Today is February 2nd, 2025, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the program. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Sunday?
Well, Spencer, hello. I'm doing well. We're back, and we are just anxiously awaiting news about when 11.1 might be coming out. I didn't really think we'd hear anything this week, and we certainly didn't. So
yeah,
we definitely have some stuff to talk about like what's coming down the road with this patch and with the season roll that we'll get into in the show today. But yeah, I think they're really just content to let this season kind of peter out, and they're just full steam ahead on the stuff that's coming up, because we have like no hot fixes this week, just no live game changes. Nothing rolled out. Last week when we spoke, it was like the last week of stuff in Siren Isle, so it's kind of business as usual. Now we got holidays going. There's like holiday stuff, limited time stuff to do,
yep.
And there's going to be more of that this week as well. But it's been pretty quiet. Other than that, it's like everything is we're in that moment of just the game's kind of holding its breath until patch.
Yeah, and I don't think that's an unfair way to describe it. I will say I'm still finding lots of things to do, so it's not like it's something where I'm going, oh man, I just barely logging into World of Warcraft. There's not really a whole lot going on, because you're right, holiday stuff's kicked off. There was the new trading post that just launched. We'll talk about that today. Lunar Fest is in full swing. It's going to wrap up, I think, Tuesday, so that there's kind of a limited window of time for things like that to get done.
No, we got one whole other week on Lunar Fest.
Another week.
Lunar Fest is a long one. And,
I couldn't remember if it was 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a full 2 weeks,
right.
And Love is in the Air starts tomorrow, which we'll talk about a little in just a bit. But
yeah,
so yeah, that's going to overlap. So yeah, Darkmoon Fair is this week.
Yeah, Darkmoon Fair just kicked off today. So yeah, there's still a lot to do in and around the game. So I'm staying fairly busy. I actually thought it was weird. I got my Plunderstorm currency mailed to me in game, which you can use to buy a piece of heroic gear, which is pretty cool, as well as some like low level 554 eye level green stuff is the currency that we got. So that's helpful for alts or whatever characters you want to do it on. It says Warbound, but I couldn't actually send the token to another character, which I thought was kind of funny. So there's something they need to resolve with that, because I couldn't put it inside my Warbank, so that's a problem. But when it comes to getting a free 610, that was really nice. My brain, though, when I got that, cued like, oh, I guess Plunderstorm's over. That's what my brain did. It was like,
right, yeah, you got a thing in the mail, so it's like, well, it must be done.
It must
right?
be done. Yeah. So no, it's still going. So if you're someone who hasn't earned all your Plunderstorm rewards yet, you can certainly still get out there and do that. I'll apologize if I sound a little bit congested today. My body has been in one of those states where it cannot decide whether it's sick or not for the last 5 days. We're like, oh, today I have like my throat's a little itchy and scratchy. That's a little weird. And then the next day that's gone, but then I'm congested and then that's kind of gone. And they're not like severe symptoms. They're just enough to be irritating and not be sure whether or not I'm sick. So that's basically what's been going on with me. But yeah, as far as World of Warcraft goes, this past week, I did a lot of Lunar Fest, like a lot of Lunar Fest. I realized that I was quite far behind on rewards. I hadn't gotten any of the headpieces yet. I hadn't gotten the 2 of the different colorations of dragon suits, and of course I wanted the mount, which was 75 tokens. So I went and got the mount by essentially doing like all of the points that I could possibly do for Elder Dragon stuff, for honoring the Elders. Elder Dragon, I don't know why that came to mind, but honoring the Elder stuff, because I went to Dragonflight to do it too. So don't forget to go there. And once I honored all the Elders, I then was able to buy the mount. And then I realized that there's the 25 one-time only per character Elder token quest. So you can get a quest that gets you 25 tokens one time per character. And so then I went, okay, well, how many druids do I have? Because druids are the best for completing the honoring the Elders quest, because dreamwalking is very broken and allows you to travel to the majority of places where there are elders, which is really nice. So not just elders, but also for completing this quest in particular. So I went through the 3 or 4 druids on my account and did that, and that got me most of the helms. And then I realized there's a follow-up quest to the helms that makes them permanent, so that you can actually use them any time of year outside of Lunar Fest. So I had to go around and do that for each of the helms as well, which is gathering flowers in different locations. And it was just about getting all the tokens for everything to be able to purchase everything up. So yeah, I definitely got some levels on some characters. I'll say that much, because you definitely get a lot of experience out of honoring the elders and even just completing some of these quests. So that was really nice. And in general, bought out all the rewards. I think I needed like 195 tokens. So buying all the rewards took a bit, but I got them all. And so that felt really good and got that done this week. Raid was good. We did a full clear. It did still take us 2 nights. We are getting to Queen on our first raid night, and then just not having clean pulls on Queen, and that's sort of what's slowing us down in the raid week from getting down to 1 night. But hopefully tonight we can see a 1 night clear. That would be really nice. I think the plan tonight actually is to skip to Queen and then go backwards, so that we're not saving the most difficult boss in the entire dungeon until the last hour of raid, when people are a little bit more tired and tuned out. So I'm hoping that works out well for us, because that could be a great thing to get a 1 night clear in. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's a good call. It's hard to keep people's attention spans up, and even if you blast through the raid, it still takes a good I don't know, hour, or give or take, even if you're going full speed ahead, right, to get to Queen. So and maybe it's closer to 2 hours even. So yeah, that people are definitely not as fresh at the end of the night. It's definitely something that I've ended up doing. If we're just doing one difficulty of an instance, all right, we need to skip first, get on your mains, pay attention for half an hour, and then you can go get other tunes or whatever, and we'll clean up the rest of the ID.
Yeah, no, in this case for us especially, when I was first asked, what's your raid schedule that you want? 10:30 to me was the latest I'd want to raid, and we raid to 11. And so you can I feel it, and I know I can notice it in the raid team, this decline in attention span and alertness that starts at 10 p.m. and just continues on towards 11 as more and more people make mistakes. People who haven't made mistakes for the whole night start making mistakes. You're just okay, this is where people start to get tired and start to fall off. And I don't understand how I used to raid until 1 a.m. I don't know. I don't like it. We were clearly much less efficient than we were when we were raiding till 11. So yeah. But outside of that, Mythic Plus wise, I haven't done a lot of keys this week. It just hasn't been my main focus. Lunarfest was kind of the main time sink for me this week. But what did you get up to this week in Mythic Plus World and whatnot, Jason?
Oh, not a whole lot. I mean, it's been a pretty light week for me. Somehow we're still managing to figure out a way to scratch and claw our way to 20 plus people on Tuesdays, so we can go in and we kind of do our standard 1, 2, 7, 8 heroic, and then Mythic 1 through 4 call it a night, regardless of what time it is at that point. And then Wednesday come back for half an hour, 45 minutes, and clean up the middle 4 heroic bosses. So that's been working out fine. I'm surprised that the Mythic attendance has held out as much as it has. I mean, I've lamented on the show that we ran out of gas for Nexus Princess Prague, which does suck, but it just is what it is. At least we can still get in there. I think, I think Rashidon, for example, is a boss that's just way more fun on Mythic than on Heroic. So
it is.
It's cool to be able to go in there and re-clear them, get some good loot. People can even bring some alts that are caught up to get kind of the, a shot at the more special pieces off of those bosses. And it's been great for my monk too, to just go through and get some drops, because people, a lot of people don't need stuff from Heroic, so I can scoop up some stuff, get his vault situated for the week just in half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever. So it's been fine. I just have no motivation really for end game stuff in season 1 at this point. So it's like I've been saying, it's more about just hanging out. Kept some keys going. Only did 10s this week because it's just kind of the way the keys shook out. I think I had an 11 necrotic wake, and a couple other people had some 11s, but it was no dungeons we wanted to do. We're really just trying to slam Dawnbreakers and Miss Satirna Scythes or stuff like that. So I just ended up doing a bunch of 10s, which considering our gear level, our level of practice and kind of coordination with the people I usually run with, they were mostly fine. Although we had some weird issues that actually killed some timers on 10s this week. We were doing a Siege of Borealis, right? First boss, he fixates on somebody and he chases him around, but he's slow and you kite him into the bombs. For some reason, he decided he wanted to fixate me, which is not usually how that works. And he wanted to, not only did he want to fixate me, he didn't want to be slow. So he just kind of hauled it over to me. But, I was okay, I'm just going to heroic leap away I'm going to situate him behind a bomb. He's going to blow up, and then I'm sure this will get back to normal. He fixates next on my demon hunter buddy, and he's moving like at least, if not, he's moving like faster than 100% movement speed. Like the demon hunter could not evade him. Kills the demon hunter, turns to the windwalker monk, who can also not outrun him. So that cost us like a full wipe and a run back and a reset, and it was just like there was weird stuff like that we ran into with a couple things where it's like, okay, well, this isn't like difficult, but the game is not cooperating with us, so now we are going to like brick this 10 timer. But there's just no, there's nothing on the line anymore. We're just doing it to hang out, get something in the fall, just in case something cool happens or whatever. So that's fine. Really, the only other stuff I did was just make sure that I was up to date with my mains professions, with mining and blacksmithing and the warrior.
Right.
So just doing that loop, mining out all the stuff until you get all the knowledge items, getting the treasures, and making sure to get all the quests and stuff done, hitting the table and keeping that stuff, grabbing any points I could grab. I did make my master's hammer for Kaz Algar, so that's cool because I have a couple pieces I can repair now. I'm about to finish off gloves. And then I'll have, I guess 4 other pieces or something that I need to learn, but it's only 25 points per armor slot. So that comes pretty fast, once you get that far through. So pretty soon I'll be able to repair pretty much all of my gear without having to spend gold again, which would be great. So it was like my one thing I wanted to make sure I did this week, because I was hitting this threshold of like, okay, like half of my gear I can repair with this hammer now. It's probably worth it to put the mats together. So, and hey, with multi-craft, I ended up with a bunch of mats I didn't need that I sold for like 20k gold or so, so that worked out great.
Nice.
But other than that, just been really not playing WoW. But outside of like, okay, it's raid time, it's guild time. There's stuff for the group to do, and there's stuff that like I don't want to fall behind on a weekly basis. But that's really just professions at this point. I don't care about rep. I don't care about, I don't know, spark fragments or something. Like what do I need? I'm so maxed out on the warrior. It's just absurd. Like I can't even, I don't think I was even this maxed out at the end of season 4 Dragonflight, where you just buy stuff you wanted, right? Like it's been like a combination of good luck and systems being generous, and also just like the amount of progress we've been able to make through this raid instance. Like, dude, my warrior's just so maxed out. It's like, okay, there's nothing to even really chase, which is a great feeling, but it leaves you in this weird spot. It's just, you kind of run out of those motivations.
Yeah, professions are definitely still the main reason I log in every day, because I am still doing professions on like all of the characters that I have. So I still have every profession represented. I've now maxed out I think the only profession I have not maxed out the skill on yet is blacksmithing, but I think Darkmoon Fair will do it for me this week. So I think I will have that maxed out this week. But yeah, otherwise I've maxed out the skill level on all the professions. I've been going through and crafting all the profession like tools for all of my characters. There's only a few of them left I haven't crafted at the high end yet. I've crafted the majority of them now. I think engineering is kind of one of the ones that I'm a little bit behind on, although I think I've crafted the engineering tool, just not the accessories. Engineering, I've gotten every recipe for now, which is great. So that's sort of all finished off. Like when I describe what I do in my week and I talk about things that aren't professions, probably the majority of my time is spent on professions still, as far as logging in and checking it on a daily basis and going through not just the NPC orders, but other people's orders, because at this point I'm able to craft a lot of things. So I sort of check every day, at least once a day, maybe twice a day, to see what people have put up for orders for actual players. And in some cases I can make, like 4,000 or 5,000 gold off of crafting jewelry or, a leatherworking piece or something like that, which is nice. So I enjoy that because I sort of feel like I'm slowly recouping. Like I'm starting to hit that point where like some of the materials are coming back into my pocket, which is nice, as opposed to the massive coin investment it was to try and get professions up and rolling. I will say that there's definitely still ones I buy materials on more than others, leatherworking being one of the big ones that I still buy materials on more than others for just like trying to get normal crafts done, because a lot of crafts are like, yeah, this just takes 150 of these and another 40 of those and 80 of these and 3 of these and 2 of those, and you're like, okay, so that's one craft and I have to do 4 of those. I have not spent the majority of my week gathering 600 leather which would take a fair amount of time. That is a fair amount of time to do that. So I definitely have not been participating in that as much. I will say that I'm doing a lot more focus on which NPC orders are for augmentation runes and starting to gather up augmentation runes again, because I know that when the next season comes out, they will start to climb back up in price again. So that is something that I'm looking at and certainly making them worthwhile. There's a lot more math happening in my head now when I look at something and go, okay, augment runes are 1,400 gold right now, and this takes me 300 gold to make. So yes, I'll make that and just sell the augment rune immediately, because that'll be a totally worthwhile, sort of flip that I can make. So that's certainly happening as well when I look at profession stuff. But yeah, it's definitely still forefront in my mind about professions. I will say I still think that all of the crafting, like actual crafting, leatherworking, tailoring, alchemy, jewel crafting, like all of these need better catch-ups than, hey, wait for NPC orders to show up that are worth 1 skill point. Like they need something else that helps them catch up as far as knowledge goes, because the knowledge points are like in dire straits for some of these. Like I'm 215 knowledge points behind on leatherworking, and you're like, okay, the only way to catch up is at 5 points at a time per week off of doing NPC orders or whatever it is, right? Even if it's 10 points per week, you're like, okay, I'm only 20 weeks out. We're only 6 months out. Let's do it. We can like, no, that's not, no. Like there should be a faster catch up than that for knowledge points. So I do feel like they need something to sort of help that process along and help people catch up a little bit faster on those professions. I know that in 11.1, we're getting the profession reset, which at this point, it doesn't really factor as much for me, because the professions that I have enough knowledge points for the ones I've been doing long enough that they're like in their final trees, which I'm super excited about for finishing those off. But I would have said 3 months ago, man, this is like, I desperately need this. So it's one of those too little too late for me as far as profession reset goes, but it's going to be a good system to have in the game going forward, as long as, next expansion, when professions roll back around again as being a new thing, we keep that profession reset. If this means that they've now developed the item and it's going to live on a vendor going forward, that's going to be great for people who are trying to do that or figure that out. And I think people making alts and whatnot might make some mistakes early on they want to correct, and it can certainly help with that as well. But for me, in my particular case now, it's kind of drifted out of the realm of, yes, I would actually use this in some way. But I will say, it's very strange to have 2 enchanters who I could make a third. I could make a third today and have caught up on knowledge points by this evening. That's how enchanting works. And that's weird comparatively to everything else. So I feel like they need to resolve the knowledge point thing for a lot of these things, whether it's, doing research or doing some sort of like experimentation or whatever it is. You need to give people a chance to get a bunch of knowledge points towards their catch up as soon as they can. And I will also say that, like, I'm using a weak aura that tells me how many knowledge points I am behind the curve, which is how I know that I'm like 200 points behind on this character and 100 behind on that one and 30 behind on that one. So, the average player isn't looking at that on a regular basis. I'm looking at that on a regular basis, and that probably creates more of this like, hey, I really want to catch up, and how do I catch up feeling on a regular basis. But I do think that it would be nice to have some way of accelerating the knowledge point acquisition for players who are just getting into professions.
I mean, all I heard was nerf enchanting.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the thing.
It's usually what they end up doing, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because like it's better in War Within, actually, and it will continue to get better as we get once we get into the new zone. There'll be new books and stuff like that. It's better than it was in Dragonflight in a lot of ways, but it's kind of the thing. Like if you didn't start from week 1 and keep up on it week to week, then somebody who did is just going to finish weeks, month, however far back you started, they're just probably going to finish that much faster than you. Because realistically, like most people don't have time to like invest that much more time in a profession to catch it back up. So, you might get some bonuses here or there if you're doing a bunch of mining or whatever, and it's like, oh, I got some points back that I didn't get, against the weekly cap, whatever you want to consider it. For me, it's like, man, I used to just kind of clear out the work order table all the time. and as long as it was stuff that I knew how to make and didn't require like sanctified alloy, which is what you need the tinder boxes for, right? I would just do it because it's like whatever. I'm spending so much time in game. I'm always out in the outdoor world. Now I'm getting a lot more picky because I'm actually kind of starting to run out of mats. I'm having to buy some mats sometimes, which is unusual for me, in general and in this expansion. So, I'm only going in on stuff that is going to give me knowledge points at the moment. I'm sure it'll open up once we're into Undermine and I'm playing a lot more, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of stuff to mine in Undermine. So, it won't be an issue at that point. And plus, my mining is closing in on being maxed out, so my yields are pretty high. I got really high quality tools and all that, so I'll be getting a lot more yield out of the time that I'm spending than I was at the beginning of season 1. So I'm sure it'll even out, throughout the rest of the expansion. But right now, it's like I'm not doing those 2+ hour long world quest loops where I'm stopping every 8 yards to mine something. I used to do that twice a week, Tuesday and Friday. I'm not doing that at all right now. So I get some stuff as I'm out there getting my knowledge points for the week, but it's not even, it's a fraction of what I was pulling in on a weekly basis before. So I'm having to be a bit pickier about it now while still trying to get, as much knowledge as I can to round out my blacksmithing trees. So that's been kind of weird. Like I hit a moment, I don't think it was this past week, it was last week. I went to craft something and I'm like, wait, I don't have any of this mat. Like I have to go to the auction house to buy mat. Like that's the first time that's happened, this whole expansion really. So it's just kind of where we're at right now. But normally like that middle patch ends up kind of expanding and all that. It doesn't like add new stuff, but it just adds so much quality of life and just kind of additional ways to either get more points or get more yield out of the time that you're spending with gathering, stuff like that. So hopefully we'll see that. Like we know that at this point there's really like there's not too much shakeup coming in terms of new recipes and stuff like that. It's not going to be some new huge addition to most professions. It's just going to be, more refinement on the stuff that we've had, like new knowledge books and stuff like that. So, which is good. I think it's good to do it that way. I don't really want a big shakeup. It would really feel bad to be like, I'm starting to see the finish line on the professions I've been working on since August. If they brought in the patch and it's like, here you go, here's some new sub trees to round out. And, I'm sure there'll be some new recipes here and there, but it's not going to be like, I don't know. I feel like I definitely felt this way in Dragonflight for sure. And also at the beginning of War Within, you learn your profession and you open up that UI panel and it's like, dude, what is all this stuff? How am I ever going to get my head around this profession and this expansion? It's definitely, it can be a lot to digest. So I think it's good to just kind of lay it out there and then just don't really add on to it. Just let players kind of absorb it over the course of the expansion.
It certainly is a over the course of the expansion kind of situation. It's one of those things where I guess with gathering professions, for me, if I'm like, hey, I have a Saturday, I'm going to be watching some shows or hanging out or sort of working on something on the side, and I just want to fly around a mine for the day, I can pick a character that's going to get catch-up knowledge on that character. But if I have any of the other professions like tailoring or leatherworking or blacksmithing or something like that, there isn't a comparable for gaining knowledge points in that same situation, right? So your gathering professions, I can get like 100 knowledge points in an afternoon if I just sit down and do it for hours on end while watching shows and doing other stuff. I can get a lot of knowledge points and feel like I've really accomplished something and progressed that character and done that while also gathering resources that I'm going to use in my other professions, and that's great. But there isn't like a comparable thing for those other professions where you're like, yeah, if I want to sit down for an afternoon and work on something, I can't do something that's going to gain me knowledge points in some way. I only have access to the ones that are limited inside of the NPC crafting order window. So it just feels like there isn't a comparable example of that. And I know, those professions are very different in the sense that one's gathering and one's crafting based, but I feel like there shouldn't be a weekly gate on how many knowledge points you can earn at this stage when we're hundreds deep into the thing. It feels weird to have a gate there, but that's just me. All right, enough knowledge point conversation. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week is the War Within Dungeon event, meaning that the Sign of the Warrior buff is up, increasing the loot dropped from the final boss in War Within Dungeons by 1, not counting Mythic Plus. There's also a quest to complete 4 dungeons on Mythic difficulty, which rewards a cache of heroic Narrowbar Palace gear. That means that on top of the Timeways event going on right now, which is Burning Crusade week for the Timeways, you can earn an additional heroic piece of loot for just running those mythic zeros, basically. And I think, yeah, it's just the 4 mythic zeros that you need to run for the current expansion content.
I think you can still do them on heroic too.
Yeah, I think I feel like heroic is still an option as well. Yeah.
It started off that way because the first dungeon event we had was before the season roll, so they kind of had to do it that way because you couldn't do mythic, and they just kept it that. I mean, the last several times it's been around, you could do it on heroic as well.
Yeah.
So which is like way too generous because there's no comparable difficulty between a heroic raid boss and a heroic dungeon. But hey, that's I'll get more into my heroic rating needs to matter more thing later in the show. I guarantee it. But
fair.
Yeah, I mean, like that seemed like a temporary change the first time we saw it, and then it's come back like every time. I'm just waiting for them to shut it off. But
look, man, they haven't fixed the questing with the world boss yet, all right? So, like, I'm not sure they're going to fix this thing. So,
yeah, but that's something that's not generous enough. This is too generous. There's usually one direction that things get fixed more quickly in. So, I don't. My expectation is that heroic will work for the 4 dungeon quest this week as well, but I'm expecting them to shut it off at any time at this point.
Yeah. So you can get two heroic raid pieces if you do your time walking event stuff. And you do your War Within event, weekly event as well. That's 2 pieces of 610 loot, which is great for folks who are trying to gear up characters. Turbulent Timeways is, I think we got 3 weeks left. So if you had not started by like the beginning of the reset, before the reset that I'm recording this in, which is before the one that's on Tuesday, then you could not get the Feat of Strength anymore. So it is gone. But you can still get really fast leveling up. It is still incredibly fast to level up through this content. And you can also get, obviously, that piece of heroic loot for characters that are max level that go in and invest the time in this. It also means, since it's Burning Crusade time walking, that Black Temple is back, and you can unlock your Warglaze of Azeroth transmog. If you're someone who already has them, go in there and defeat Illidan in time walking, and you will be able to use them as a transmog piece. As well as the loot out of there is comparable to normal raid loot. So if you're someone who's trying to gear up a character and you've done your LFR for the week, you could also try and fit into a Black Temple run and get that. And you can get, for completing the quest, you get a piece of 610 Burning Crusade raid loot. So if you're like, hey, I want to gear up a character this week, guess what? You can get 3 pieces of heroic loot by just going to do the War Within Dungeon event, and then the Burning Crusade time walking, and then doing the Burning Crusade Black Temple, just kill Illidan, and that'll get you 3 pieces of 610 loot on a character, which is huge.
Yeah. And people will probably have groups open with an ID at Illidan like all week. So just use the group finder, and you can, I haven't done this just because I just don't have, I don't have the time or motivation to sit there and like rotate tunes through that. And I don't really think it's that fun. So and obviously like very minor benefit to my main, but I hear from people every time that, a time walking raid is around. Yeah. There's just always IDs open at the final boss. So I just go in and do it on 3 tunes and just get it done. So
there's people who basically go, hey, if you enjoyed the run, give me a tip. And basically they make some gold off of people going, thanks for having an idea in Illidan. Here you go. Like, that's literally what it is. They will get it. They will form a raid group, get the raid group into the instance, and then they will leave the instance and let the raid group kill it, and then they'll go into the next one. And it's just do that over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's cool. It works out for everybody. I mean, it's not really designed to be some challenging thing. So really good week for catching up a character's gear if you're so inclined. You just have so many options this week. And Black Temple's a pretty fun time walking raid. Like if your raid group wants to hang out and do something, but Narrowbar Palace is pretty long in the tooth, and need some other kind of variety, something else to do, whatever. People have also want to play. Black Temple's a great option for that. It's a pretty fun run. I mean, it's a huge instance, but the way it's tuned, like, it should be pretty doable for whatever tunes you want to bring. And as long as you can navigate your way around that massive raid zone, like, you'll be fine. So yeah, it's cool. This is the time walking raids are always good at the very beginning and the very end of seasons. I feel like in the middle of seasons, they compete, there's too much competition for your time and they're not kind of rewarding enough. But early on, they're great for mains because they offer so many options for easy gear. And then, when the season is on its way out, great time to catch up, returning players, alts, people switching mains for the new season, whatever. This is like between the dungeon event and Burning Crusade time walking, dungeon weekly, and raid. It's like some of the easiest heroic raid equivalent gear you're going to get. Plus, keep in mind, like, if killing raid bosses in Black Temple counts towards the weekly quest, it's like you have to either do the dungeons or kill raid bosses. So if you have a group that just go blast Black Temple all the way out, then you also complete the dungeon weekly, and this time you don't have to spend doing that to get your box.
True. All right, the other stuff going on this week is the Delves Weekly for Bran. So this is the get in there and run some Delves this week to get yourself your Spark Fragment, if that's something you're looking to do. Obviously, if you picked up last week's quest or the week that we're currently recording in, you can still have that quest and complete it because they run on a 3-week cycle. So you have 3 weeks to complete each of these. So you pick up your Delve Weekly from Bran, and if you don't run your Delves this week, you can run them next and still get the same kind of rewards based out of it. It just might mean you get your fragment out of, like, running a Mythic Plus dungeon or something else, because that's basically how the system works. Is once you're behind on fragments, they will catch you up through a lot of different reward bags, so that way you can make sure you're still getting those fragments for crafting if that's something you're wanting to do. And at this point, crests are pretty easy to come by, so if you are someone who's like, man, I just can't seem to get a piece of loot in a certain slot, definitely look at some of the crafting options. There's a lot of crafting options out there that are good, that will help you fill out some of those weaker points in your gear, and the embellishments are quite strong. So definitely make sure you're looking at what embellishments you might want to put on for the different class or role that you're playing. So be sure you're looking at that when you're crafting stuff as well. I know the big craft for me this week was rolling pins, because I've finally got the recipe for rolling pins. So I was able to get my cooking profession tools upgraded on characters that I wanted to upgrade on. So that was my large craft out of that. But all right. The other things you should be looking at this week, the special assignment world quests, which pop on Tuesdays and Fridays, the theater troupe, which runs every hour on the hour. Awakening the Machine is always a good one to check out and do stuff down there. Spreading the Light, very easy to accomplish as a single task, but also lots of rewards that you can earn just through actually participating in the events that are there, and lots of events to do. The Severed Threads Pact that is going on, where you pick which spider boss you're helping out, and basically you get rewards based off which spider boss you're helping out. And I always pick the same one, and I always get the 30% increased gathering speed, which is amazing. So definitely be looking at that if you aren't doing that regularly. You don't even have to complete that quest to get that buff. You just have to say, yes, I will help this one. And then you don't even have to complete the quest. You just then have the buff. So certainly get down there and take advantage of that. The World Soul Memories, if this is, you're like, man, I'm so far behind on Valor Stones, I need a way to catch up on Valor Stones. World Soul Memories are your best friend when it comes to this sort of thing. So definitely take advantage of running those. Be sure you get into a raid group. Just look for a raid group that's running them and hop in, and basically you'll get yourself 400 or 500, stones that are just doing that. So certainly worthwhile doing. This week is also Comp Stomp Week. That's right. It is the week for those of us who want to get a whole bunch of honor without a lot of effort. This is the week to do it. Get in there, run your brawls, get your comps stomp in. You basically go into Arathi Basin against advanced AI bots. These matches typically last between 4 and 5 or 6 minutes long, and you get yourself some honor out of it, and you can just keep chain queuing them, and people will be running them all week. The first win you'll get the Something Different quest completion for 5 marks of honor, 65 conquest, and 250 honor. But yes, if you're someone who wants to honor farm, which I'm getting to that point of, because there's a lot of PvP gear that I like, I want to be able to craft for catch up catch up knowledge points, but I can't, because it costs 30,000 gold for the recipe on the auction house because someone has farmed the honor and spent it on buying the recipe and then put it on the auction house. So there's two options. You could be someone who farms the recipes and puts them in the auction house. If you're someone who doesn't really care about them, that's great to do because that, obviously makes you gold and helps other people get those recipes. Or you can be someone who's a crafting profession who's like, hey, I currently could get, 2 knowledge point skill ups off of like a non-catch-up like normal orb if I just knew how to make this hammer. That's a PvP hammer. And I don't want to spend 30,000 gold for that, so I'm going to go grind out the 7,500 honor it takes to buy this particular recipe. So this is a great way to do that if that's something you want to do. So we all love CompStop over here.
Yeah, super fun. Pretty self-explanatory. It's you just get in there. You're probably going to win pretty much every time you queue up. The AI bots are better than like mobs that you fight in the outdoor world, but it's not like there's some kind of deep strategy that they're carrying out either. So get in there, rack up some wins, and yeah, it is. That's a good thing to do, is to use the PvP currency to buy the recipes and stuff. You get the first craft bonuses, and plus it just gives you more opportunities to make stuff, for gold for work orders and stuff like that. So that's a little addition to the first season here of War Within that you might want to get. I haven't really gotten into it too much, but a buddy of mine PvPs pretty regularly, and he just kind of randomly gets patterns that he doesn't need, so he sends me the blacksmithing stuff.
Oh, that's very nice of him. I'm sure he saved you hundreds of thousands of gold.
Yeah, I have most of them at this point. I think there's still a couple I don't have, but yeah, I sort of lucked out with that. But yeah, this is a great option. That's another thing to consider. If you're like, whatever, I'm not a PvPer, I don't really care about this. I don't care about PvP gear. If you are into professions, though, I mean, yeah, there are recipes for PvP specific gear and stuff from these vendors, like you kind of pointed out. So, that's a consideration as well. And CompStop is just fun, I think. I mean, who doesn't want to feel like a god running around AB just like stomping bots? Like, it's fun. Yep. So, that's the number one thing. And then it has this nice benefit in this expansion of, well, if you're not a regular PvPer, you might be able to grab some recipes and stuff while you're doing it.
All right. The weekly world boss this week is Shirai, the Atrocity of the Undersea in Hallowfall. So if you want to head down to Hallowfall, you get your chance at some 603 loot. And the Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Oblivion and Tyrannical at 4 and Fortified at 10. So this means that there's crystals that spawn and move towards an enemy while in combat. If the crystal reaches the target gets 10% damage reduction. If the players absorb it, they get Mastery and Leech. And obviously, this is the one that people have the hardest time consistently getting on their characters and not having the bosses or enemy mobs get, because these can spawn in situations. I always think of the second boss of Arakara, where we are inside of a circle, and that circle is the safety zone, and going out of the circle, you take a lot of damage. And all these orbs spawn behind the boss, inside the big stormy area, not inside of the circle, and then just go into the boss's butt, and suddenly the boss takes 90% reduced damage. And you're like, great, thanks, game. That's, that is the thing that can happen with these. This is the buff players are least likely to actually get on a consistent basis. So it's not a phenomenal Mythic Plus week, but I will say the Mastery and Leech buff is a noticeable buff. It is a nice thing to have. So when you do happen to get it, it's actually pretty cool and helpful, and it is one of the better ones. So I certainly appreciate this more than haste and movement speed. I think Mastery and Leech is a better buff overall for folks to get. So that will help you out in some of the dungeons you're doing. But just beware of the bosses and the situations where these orbs spawn, where you cannot safely get them. You're doing the second last boss inside of Siege of Borealis, and there's a wave coming, and all of the orbs spawn where the wave is, and you have to essentially run away from the wave, which is running away from the orbs, and the boss just walks into all of them. So yeah, that's the type of thing you'll be dealing with this week.
We'll put it this way. The only Zalatas bargain affix that is not returning for season 2 is Oblivion. So
yep,
it's not like we have some, vendetta against this affix personally. I think it just stinks, and I don't think we're alone in thinking it stinks. The buff is nice. It's a good buff, but yeah, it's very disruptive. It's very confusing. It's so much visual noise on the screen. The crystals don't really behave in the way that you expect them to all the time, because they try to like move towards an enemy, but then if the enemy like phases out or becomes untargetable or moves to a weird position, then they'll move back towards you or towards an ad or something, and then they'll start moving again. So yeah, it's just, so you're already disrupting yourself to try to catch an orb that then starts moving in a different direction. And yeah, like you mentioned, sometimes depending on when they spawn during a boss fight, it might be literally impossible to collect a bunch of them, and then the boss is going to get some, if not most of them. I mean, even Mrs. Tyrannicide, this affix actually sucks on Mrs. Tyrannicide, which is an easy dungeon, but it's so bad on all three bosses.
All three bosses,
So yeah, like it's just not, it's not the one that you want to see. I think it's by far the hardest one to deal with, because there's no way to, you can kind of comp yourself out of a couple of these, right? Like Ascendant, oh, you monk. Okay, well the monk drops Ring of Peace, which has like limited utility in most situations in this dungeon pool. You just dropped it on the orbs and they all break, right? Like, oh, you have Void Bound. Well, everybody just blows up the emissary. Use your executes on it, kill it in a couple GCDs. Okay, next. Devour, especially with the Cersei circlets and everything. Like, I mean, Devour just pops at this point. Oblivion's the one that's like, okay, just everybody try to grab as many of them as you can, try not to die in the process, So, yeah, it stinks. And then you got low level tyrannical this week too. So it's really not a great week. If you're trying to push through the system, if you haven't been doing Mythic Plus and you want to start knocking out those, rank based achievements and stuff like that, like this is not the week I would say get in there and do them, because like next week will be easier, and the next 2 weeks after that will be even easier. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And we have seen now like what the replacement for this is going to be, and what it looks like is it's like a similar object to the crystal that spawns, but it spawns like around each player. And I think what you have to do is like absorb each other's that are rotating around each of you. So it should be a lot less disruptive, because generally like players are going to be mostly pretty close to each other, and then you can kind of figure out how you're going to arrange this, versus 10 orbs spawn from random locations at different times all around the arena and then start moving wherever they want to move to. So hopefully we got like, I don't know, this might be the like second to last time or something that we see this before it gets replaced.
Yeah, true.
So that's, there you go. I'll silver lining it for you a little bit. Like we're probably almost done with this thing, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, whatever. I'll probably get in. I'll do my normal kind of slate of a small handful of 10s, 11s, and call it a week. But yeah, I there's a reason why this affix is going away next season.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Darkmoon Fair is up and running and is live through Saturday, the 8th of February. So be sure that you head on down to Darkmoon Fair, get those knowledge points and skills for your professions. Pick up that reputation and experience buff before you do your time ways, so you get that extra, experience gain that you want to get. Be sure that you are doing the like Dance event if you still want some achievements. You're getting all of the Darkmoon Fair tokens you want to buy your dirigible. All those things you may want to do, you can do down at the Darkmoon Fair. So take advantage of that. Also, the the salmon that you can get there? That's a really good food. If you're doing Mythic Plus, you can catch up on your health and your mana and stuff really fast with the salmon food from Darkmoon Fair that you fish out of the water. So lots of things over at the fair to check out for sure. And Lunar Festival, as we mentioned top of the show, is running for another week. It runs till the 11th of February. So if you're someone who has not yet done the 8 Elders of Khazalgar to get that achievement, or has not gathered your 75 coins of ancestry to get your lunar launcher mount, which is literally a rocket that's dressed up like a dragon, it's certainly cool. So be sure you're checking that mount out. Or if you have not, gotten your you spent your 50,000 gold to get your Winding Slither Drake Lunar Festival armor, if that's something you're wanting to get, you can get that from Valadar Starsong at the Lunar Festival vendors. And then of course there's, if you weren't around for Dragon Isles, you can get yourself the Dragon Isles achievement by going back there and honoring all the elders there, if that's something you're wanting to do. And then like I said, there's 3 dragon costumes that you can get that are 3 pieces a piece, because there's a front end, a back end, and a middle. There's all of the flower crowns that you can get, which not only are like a purchasable thing, but then there's a quest once you've purchased it to actually improve it, get like another version of it, a better version of it. So be sure you're getting both of those if that's something you haven't done yet. There's Omen. If you actually go out there and kill Omen on a regular basis, you get a buff. That's a really nice, just straight up primary stat buff that you can get. I imagine it goes away in Mythic Plus and things like that, but it's an easy buff to get for someone who's like, hey, I just want to get this and then do my like world quest rounds or whatever it is you're wanting to do. You will have a very powerful buff to complete all those tasks quickly. And there's other transmogs you can get. There's the Lunar Elders Hearthstone, which came out a while back. You can pick that up too if you're looking to do it. And there's just a lot of fireworks to fire off. If you're someone who likes fireworks, there's a lot of fireworks. So take advantage of the fireworks while you can too.
Yeah, it's pretty simple holiday overall in terms of structure. There's like some stuff to do in Moonglade, but there's no reason to keep like going back there, I guess, and other than that, it's not, it's like there's some hub of like daily quests to be slamming every day on 8 tunes, and let's just go find the elders, get your coins, spend them on stuff. That's about it, which is fine, especially considering that it tends to overlap with Love is in the Air many years, including this one.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
it's like we kind of mentioned, it's good for doing pacifist leveling, which is where like you level up a tune without killing anything, like no combat. A lot of
experience,
you gather, you explore, and you do quests that you don't have to do combat. There's so many elders to talk to, and you get quest XP for each of those. So that's cool. I mean, I feel like the WoW challenges thing used to be a bigger deal years ago before we had like an official hardcore server, for example, right? I feel like that's just kind of the thing now that sort of grabs everybody's attention. But still, I mean, these things do still exist, so you can check that out. And if you're doing that, then that's a great opportunity to grab some XP. But I got to do this. I got to get the new achievement for the new elders, and I got to get the lunar launcher mount is pretty cool.
It's cool.
I kind of I'm sort of notorious for not being like a mount guy. Mounts don't really do much for me, but I do want to buy this thing. It is cool. This is cool enough for me to go around and get coins and buy it, I think.
Just remember, pick a character that you can get the 25 tokens on for doing the quest, right? Because that way you can pick up that quest.
Yeah.
While you're doing your elders, you're also completing the quest, which is like going to different moon wells and charging up a staff. And then you turn in the staff at the end of the quest when you're gathering stuff, and you get 25 tokens. So you then only need to get 50, which you can get by doing Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdom, and then you're set, right? And a lot of the elders are just outdoors. You just fly up to and talk to and get your token from. There are some that are inside of dungeons. You shouldn't need to do a lot of the ones inside of dungeons to get this mount. But if you do have to do ones in dungeons, remember, Northrend is a place. And Wrath of the Lich King had some of the shortest and fastest dungeons in the game. Right. And so if you really want to get some extra tokens on top of clearing all the ones that are outdoors in Northrend, all the ones in Eastern Kingdoms, all the ones in, Kalimdor, all the ones in Dragon Isles, all the ones in Khazalgar, you can get all those first outdoors really easy. Then you can go to Northrend and run some dungeons, and, you can easily get, you can plow through those and get some more out of the actual dungeons themselves if you're looking to fill in some gaps. But if you have the 25 token one, you should be able to easily skip all of that and just do the outdoor stuff that's super easy to get. So yeah, worthwhile. So
doing. They didn't. No, I haven't done any of this yet this year. Yeah. They haven't updated the coins of ancestry, right? They're not currency. They're items. They're items in your bag. So
that are soul bound.
That they're soul bound. Yeah.
Yes, they are not war bound. Yeah.
Because some of this would like war bound. Yep. Coins of Ancestry would kind of break everything, because you could just spin up tunes and do the intro quests and then transfer 25 coins at a time to a main and, just collect them all on one tune. And
yeah, I mean, it would still
cash them in. So
it'd still be a time investment, like completing the quest, just doing the quest on its own. It's still like 25, 30 minutes of flying around doing stuff. Like there is still a time investment there. It's not like you talk to the person and then you like run around Moonglade and then you come back and you have 25 tokens. It's, you do have to travel to different moonwells around Azeroth, because there's some that are Western Kingdom, some that are Eastern Kingdom, which is why I say, pick up the quest and then go do the elders, because you can do them on the way while you're doing that and get the quest done at the same time. And you can sort of just keep a track in your inventory of, hey, I've hit 50 tokens. Have I finished that quest? No, I just need to go over to Duskwood and do that last well. Okay, I did that last well in Duskwood. Okay, I'm done. Let's go back to Moonglade. Turn that in. Here's 75 by your mount. Like that feels good to be able to do that. So for me, it was realizing, oh, all of the headpieces are 25 apiece, all of the dragon costumes are 25 apiece, so I'm going to spin up characters that I've played before that are in like, you know, that I think one of them was like 30 and one of them was 70 and one of them was 40 and whatever it was, and just take them out there, pick up this quest, fly to the Moonwells and fly back. And that was shorter than me trying to gather 25 tokens from Honoring Elders. Like Honoring Elders, 25 tokens probably would have taken me 10 or 15 minutes longer versus just going and doing the wells and then going back. So I saved some time doing that, which was nice.
Yeah, the yield is definitely a little bit higher with that bonus on top of it. So yeah, I guess another thing too is, again, anything could change, but traditionally the coins of ancestry do not expire. They don't have a duration at the end of the event or whatever. So I guess keep that in mind too, is like sometimes you end up in that situation where maybe you have a bunch of stuff on a holiday vendor to catch up on. So you end up kind of overshooting the amount of stuff that you need because you do stuff on various tunes and you get this much from this quest and this much from this boss or whatever. This one doesn't really work like that, as we sort of mentioned. So I guess like if you have time to do this, like you can theoretically just bank up a bunch of coins on a tune or whatever. And, okay, if you're all caught up, cool. But then you can kind of get ahead on if new stuff will come out in the future. I guess the question is it going to be, next year or 2027 or later? But, in the past, the coins of ancestry have not expired at the end of the event because they're actual items. They're items that you have on your character. They're not in the currency tab. So, well, and even something to keep in mind, maybe, that could change, but it, just to put that out there, it does work a little different than some other holidays. So if you want to like pre-bank coins, you probably can still do that.
Even other holiday events where you do get physical items in your bags often have a duration, and that duration is a timer for when the event ends. So you can actually see like, oh, I've gotten my candies for Halloween, for example, that my tricky treats that I want to go trade in. They'll actually have on them duration 19 days or whatever it is, right? And you're like, oh, okay, this is going to go away in this period of time and it will be gone. So that you're aware of that. Whereas the lunar tokens they're just soulbound items that sit in your bag. So the presumption is, that you'd be able to bank these as much as you want to bank them and be able to have a stockpile. So if there was another mount or something that came out next year, you'd be ahead of the game if you needed to. It'd be very weird for them to ever put anything out that required multiple years to earn. I don't see that ever happening, but it would be really silly if they did. But I can see them putting out another thing that costs like 75, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I've already done the one-time quest, so I either need to find another character I'm going to do this on, or, I essentially have to do a lot more farming than I did previously. So certainly something that you could keep in mind as well. Okay, Love is in the Air is kicking off tomorrow, actually. It runs February 3rd until the 17th. And so, we have a whole new sort of stuff from 2024. So the Gala of Gifts outside of Stormwind and Orgrimmar means that you can get the new Heartseeker Mana Ray mount from last year, as well as the Heartseeker Moth is available there as well. There are new toys with the Date Simulator modulator for 100 tokens as well. And this you can use to place down a modulator for up to 2 hours that allows you to view the world from a different perspective. There's a cloaking device attached to this that ensures that only members of your party and raid can see the machine and its effect. So yes, this is if you want to go on a date with somebody, you can put this thing down. As long as they're in your group, they'll be able to see it. You can only use it outside, so you can't troll people and raid with it, which is good. There's also the Exquisite Love Boat, which is 270 tokens. The Eyes for You Only, which is another toy that you can pick up. And then actually, no, I think it's just a consumable item that lets you tune out party members. There's new transmog for the Forever Lovely Rose colors. There's all sorts of different rose colors from 2024, as well as the Scenic Gateway Portal, which is a way to teleport to romantic places around Valdrakken, and check that out if that's something you're wanting to do. The quests that existed there as well allows you to take a look around. The Getaway Scenic Faralas, the Gift of Relaxation, and the Crushing the Crown quest chain are all things that you can participate in. They came in during Dragonflight. And then the last bit is the renewed Proto-Drake Love Armor is something that you can try and get, as well as characters level 60 and above can try and get themselves the X45 Heartbreaker mount, which is supposed to have bad luck protection and is supposed to be something that the first time you try and get on your account every week is a higher chance, or every day, sorry, is a higher chance to get the mount. So that is something to consider as well. And there's, of course, the next from the holiday boss as well. So if you have an alt that you're trying to get geared up, sometimes running the holiday boss is just a great way to get a nice neck piece for that character to sort of help them out. So be sure you're checking out Stormwind and Ogremar for your, your daily quests and gifts and whatnot, and doing the quest chain outside of SFK for the daily quest that's out there. So you get yourself some more tokens from that. And then, of course, expect your bags to be littered with lovebird hatchlings, petal feats, and toxic wasteling pets, because you'll get a whole bunch of those potentially from the reward bags where you're trying to get your X45 Heartbreaker mount. And so, yeah, there's lots to do, including the Swift Lovebird mount as well. So Loves in the Air is kicking off. We don't know if there's like brand new 2025 stuff that they haven't announced yet, which we'll find out tomorrow. But there's certainly stuff from last year that if you didn't get around to, there's plenty you can do there.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some kind of new stuff. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know what. Yeah, last year was like a huge rework to this event, and I think they made it a lot better. I really actually had fun with the quests that they put in outside the main hub cities. I thought they were cool and a lot better. I liked them better than the old style of like collect the charms and make the bracelets and give them to the faction leaders and all that. I mean, this was years and years ago now, but that's how Love is in the Air used to revolve around that kind of thing. I thought the quest had some kind of clever writing and were like decently fun for what they were asking you to do, and also, they weren't scattered all over the place. Like you could just go to the hub and kind of mostly do stuff, and plus being able to dynamic fly all around the world makes the travel kind of negligible as well. So that's all really good. Yeah, this is the first time we've seen this since they made the changes to the logic for a holiday boss mounts dropping. And of course, that's like the main. Everything else we're talking about, nobody cares, right? At large, the WoW player base does not care about all these other things. This is all about the rocket mount, the Heartbreaker. It's all anybody wants, and it seems to be the one that has eluded people the most over the years. I don't have it, and not like I've ever really tried like I said, I'm not a mount guy, and in particular I really do not like the aesthetics of this mount. Like I can't imagine actually using this on any of my characters, but I'll do the bosses on a daily basis because of other reasons. I'm collecting the currency, I'm participating in the holiday, there's other stuff I want to buy. I have both Brewfest mounts, I have the Horseman mount, I have like everything that comes off of these things almost. I think there was like one mount armor I didn't get last year when they put stuff in for the Drakes, and I don't have this. So we'll see. Maybe this is the year that the chase ends for a lot of people. If the streak protection pays off, we'll see. I guess the question is going to become: is the streak protection like cumulative over time, or does it reset when 2026 rolls around? I guess that's what we'll find out. But yeah. I mean, last year they added a ton of new stuff. So if you weren't playing or you were like checked out and you didn't do this stuff, you might have a lot of stuff to go back and check out. I just got to run through the checklist. I think I got everything, but I'm not sure. So I might have that. And then there'll probably be some new stuff on top of it. So, which is good. I mean, they want the holidays to be like relevant for a lot of players, and, to have stuff that's interesting to work on acquiring and whatnot. So it's like good if there's stuff that you don't have and that you want to go get. But, yeah, they added. I mean, geez, I'm just looking at our list from last year of what was new, and like the amount of like token prices, value of stuff that got added last year was a lot. So if you didn't do any of that, man, you might log in tomorrow and be like, okay, I'm either picking and choosing, or I'm really getting to work, or I'm just totally ignoring this forever now. I think there's like one of three directions to be going in at this point.
It is a lot of tokens. It will take a lot of time. You might want multiple characters if you're trying to catch up on everything. It'll be a similar thing where I'm sure we'll talk about, since this runs for a couple weeks, we'll talk about next week as well, of like, hey, here's, if I dove into it like I did Lunar Fest, it'll be like, here's what you need to be doing to be earning all of these rewards. But we'll find out. And like I said, we'll see if there's anything 2025 got added in there as well. I'm sure there'll probably be something inside Dornegal. I'd be surprised if they didn't do something, but we will see what they choose to do. All right, a new Plunderstorm reward is now available. I talked about this at the top of the show as well. This is the extra currency. Basically, Kyvax comes in and says, since Plunderstorm returned to Azeroth, Captain Kegleg has been holding back a fine reward as of 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on January 31st. This is now fixed. Players who have accumulated 5,000 plunder or players who hereafter earn 5,000 plunder should check their in-game mailbox for a message from Kegleg containing loot. The side note here is that it contains a storm-singed plunder, which grants 1 Kegleg silver spoils and 2 Kegleg's bronze spoils. The silver can be turned in for a heroic Nerebar Palace piece of loot, as well as the bronze turned in for 554 at max level, eye level loot. And yeah, like I said, there were some issues with this currency being warbound, or that the token you buy that says it's warbound being warbound and be able to move it around. But yeah, I logged into my rogue to do my engineering profession stuff and was like, what's this in my mailbox? And then suddenly I had this, because it's just the first character you log into. So be aware of that as well. It wasn't like, hey, yeah, I got to choose something. It was, no, the first character I logged into got this stuff, and then it wasn't warbound, and I was like, I can't move it around. Yay. So yeah,
that seems like a problem. Like, it's cool, it's nice,
yeah.
It's good. It's not good that the warbound thing doesn't work.
It might be fixed now. I haven't tried it since,
hopefully,
but yeah,
because like also I'm sure a lot of people weren't expecting it, and you just log into whatever tune you log into first, and then it's like, well, that's not how I wanted to do that. So yeah, not ideal. Not ideal.
It was a weird way to distribute it. But if you're trying to find this vendor, the place where you go and turn in all of your crafting orders, and you spend all of your acuity, all of that kind of stuff inside of Dornegal, just to the right of that, when you're facing the entrance, is a hut where you spend another type of currency to buy a bunch of transmog stuff, and he's chilling in there. You just go to the vendor in there. He's leaning against a table, and you use your currency there to buy these tokens, or spend these tokens, if that's something you're wanting to do on that character. All right. Celebrating 2 years of Trading Post under the lunar light of February. Join us for a celebration anniversary, for the second anniversary of the Trading Post in February, and shop new and previous released items at special vendors in Dornegal. This month, bring in the Lunar New Year in style with the ensemble of the ornate pink lunar festival attire, and celebrate the Trading Post second anniversary in February. We're celebrating these. They keep saying the second anniversary of the Trading Post like 7 times in the beginning of this post. But basically, yes, they're allowing you to get 500 additional tender this month to expand sort of what you have access to. There's a bunch of vendors. So when you're running up to the Trading Post vendors, if you turn around and run away from them in a straight line, you'll run into more vendors. There's just on that same tier of platform. If you came down those stairs and went left as opposed to right towards the Trading Post, you'd bump into another group of vendors. And they're selling a bunch of older stuff. Not all of it's discounted, but a lot of it's discounted. And if you're looking to spend up some of your tender right now, there's a bunch of stuff that you can get for all of the old things that are there. So be sure you're picking out what you might want from that and understanding how much tender you're going to earn this month. There are new things. The Silver Moon Sweeper is a very cool mount that's like a broom motorcycle that you can fly around on, and that's 600 tender this month. It's pretty neat. It's certainly one of the highlight pieces. There's also the Full Belly Rolling Paw, which is this like very artistically styled pet that you can get for 350 tender. This is actually, apparently, from what I've heard, is the vendor that you go to if you are on the Chinese servers to like get tokens from, or something like that, for raid loot or something along these lines. It's a model that's used in the Chinese version of World of Warcraft as a vendor that you're like, we do not have over here in NA. And they've now applied it as a pet that we can get over here. So yeah, that's a thing.
Super cool looking. It looks like a red panda or like a raccoon type thing. It's described as a Mixie, which is a species that I don't know if we've ever heard of in Warcraft before.
Nope.
I can't think of any other time that it's been applied to anything. So I don't know. Maybe this is some kind of a tease. Like sometimes we've seen stuff come in through various promotions for cosmetics, like mounts and pets, that end up paying off later with. Yeah. Some other location in the game or some other thing. Sometimes they seed stuff that way. So definitely cool looking. Definitely on my list for this month. There's 2 different color varieties of it that are both pretty cool. And yeah, who knows? It could be like a new, I don't know, new NPC faction, new type of like humanoid maybe. Who knows? Maybe playable race someday. It's kind
I
of
don't
like
know, man. I don't know about playable race.
Volpera-esque. I mean, like this one's pretty small, but like you could easily see that being like a Volpera type character or something. Maybe that could be cool.
Have they ever put a pet into the game that became a playable race?
Well, technically, there was a Chen Stormstout pet before you could play Pandaren, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there was a Pandaren pet. I don't know. Anytime they introduce some kind of new concept into the fiction, like my mind starts racing a little bit. So I'm looking at this going, what is a Mixie? And then I'm trying to see if there's like any other supporting information somewhere that I missed or forgot about from years ago or whatever. And on this one I got nothing. I think this is just kind of a new concept that they're bringing in here.
Yep. As far as armor appearances go, there's the Crimson Lotus Lunar Explosives backpack that you can get. There is a new coloration of the war skirt and leg wraps that we saw last month. Last month I think were yellow. These ones are red. There's the weapon transmog appearances for the Crimson Lunar Fire Whacker, as well as the Crimson Lunar Lantern. The Fire Whacker is a one-handed like flail that you can hit people with that are fireworks. It's pretty cool. There's the monthly bonus for the Ornate Pink Lunar Festival attire. If you're someone who, is wanting to sport that is an option as well. It's head, chest, shoulders, waist, and feet for transmog that you'll get for completing the monthly reward. There's the older stuff to me definitely caught my eye a bunch. I definitely purchased a few things that were on big discount. There's a few weapon models that are just phenomenal that I definitely still want to get, so I'm debating on those. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff from this trading post that's nice. I will say they set it up as like this thing last month where they're going, do not spend tender if you don't really want something, because this is going to be crazy. It's not quite as crazy and wild as I expected it to be, but I am glad they're doing it. It is neat to have the discounts out there. I do think they could do the discount thing more often. I do think they could increase the overall tender we earn every month by 500 regularly, and that would be fine. I do think there's a lot of stuff out there now on the vendors, and with the prices that we're seeing, it's difficult for people to buy even like half, if not like a fifth of the things that are on the actual trading post every month. So I think that it might make sense for them to mess with the currency a bit, and it's probably best to just turn up the dial on how much people can earn to sort of let people get a little bit more stuff every month if they're actually playing the game regularly. Like I'm not saying, hey, for doing the same amount of effort, they should just give us more stuff as far as, getting tender goes. I'm saying expand that bar out so that, if you're somebody who plays on a weekly basis, you can earn 2,500 tender a month. And I think that would be fine if that's something you're wanting to do. I don't think that would be a problem they would be creating by doing that. As long as people are, participating in the game regularly to earn it, it shouldn't be a big deal at all. So I think that makes sense to me. I like the idea of having discounts though. I think in general, this is something we see with other games pretty frequently inside cash shops. I don't see there being a massive difference between the trader's tender and a cash shop. It is still a finite resource that is something people really have to think about before they spend a lot of the time, and often hoard or hang on to if there isn't something they really want. So I would be fine with them turning up the dial a bit more on tender, and giving everyone a bit of a raise would be nice for the efforts that people put in on a regular month, as well as keeping the discounts rolling in on older stuff that's out there.
Yeah, I really like the idea of, okay, you get the bonus reward at 1,000, and then if you want to keep going, you can earn an extra 500. Like they did that. Was that in November or December? They did it in a month recently.
Yeah,
and I thought that was cool, and so I like seeing that come back. I really wouldn't mind having that every month. You don't get anything from the trading post that gives your character any kind of an advantage. It's just not what it's for. It's just for cosmetics, and it's not like they generally sell tender directly, right? Like there's been some controversies about some bundles that included tender on the cash shop and whatever, but there's no direct cash conversion. It's not like you can just buy tender. So it's not something they're trying to make cash off of. So I think they could hand it out a bit more. One cool thing, I was looking at the vendors this morning, and like the new vendors they put in, they're kind of down the main drag from where the trading post is, and Dornegal, and a bunch of the stuff that's on them is monthly bonus rewards from months past. So if it was something that you missed because you weren't playing that month or whatever, you can go back and get them at a discounted rate for tender this month. I think that's a cool way to do it. I mean, I've seen some, like, the downside of this that I've seen some people kind of expressing is like, well, if stuff comes back and it's cheaper, then people are just going to hoard tender and wait for it to come back on discount.
Yeah.
I think there might be something to that, but in general, I don't think that's how people approach the trading post.
No.
It's more like, okay, I like me, I have like, I don't know, 6,000 tender. Like, I just buy a couple things here and there. I don't, there's very rarely something on there where I'm like, this is awesome, I need this, or I need all of this. There are some people who are just massive collectors of a particular thing. So any mount, any pet, whatever it is that shows up, they're going to buy it no matter what. And then there's people who are completionists and they just need everything. And it's like, I will never have enough tender.
Yeah.
I don't think there are people who are going, okay, now that I see that this is possible, I am hoarding tender and I'm only like a coupon clipper. Like, I'm only buying stuff on discount and I'm waiting and I'm hoarding all my tender till it comes. I don't think people are going to do that.
It's weird because the people who are expressing that are like, oh, well, now the correct way to use the trading post is to save all of your tender and only buy things on discount. And I was like, I don't.
It's not. No.
What is wrong? Like, who is thinking that there's a correct, like this? No, I'm sorry. There's not. No.
The correct way to use the trading post is to spend your tender however you want. Whatever makes you the most happy, that is what it's there for.
Yeah.
I don't know. I understand that the collecting element is a much bigger part of the game to some people than it is to me. I like what I like, and I tend to zoom in on that stuff, and everything else I don't really care about. So, there are some months where I spend like 3,000 tender on the trading post, and then there's stretches of months and months where I barely spend any. So, looking through this month, I do think one thing, like remember last year, February was like all Love is in the Air stuff, and it was just like, none of this is hitting for me. I don't want any of this stuff. This year, it's like all Lunar New Year kind of stuff, and like firecrackers and stuff like that, which is okay. There's a couple weapons and stuff that I think would match some transmog sets that I have. But it's cool that they're doing a different flavor, but then they also brought back some Love is in the Air stuff from last year. So there's some decent variety. I do have to laugh because, like, we had that dynamite offhand last month, and you like combine that with the back piece with the firecrackers on it and the exploding mace, and you just blow up everything if you want to, if you could start combining that stuff.
I want to mention one other thing with the collectors thing they were talking about, which is one of the people who felt that way about there's a solve and this is the correct way, et cetera, replied to me basically saying, hey, well, Trader's Tender is a finite resource. It's not like a cash shop. You can only get, so you can calculate how much Trader's Tender there is out there, et cetera. And I didn't reply to them, but all I could think to myself was, if money isn't a finite resource for you, congratulations. That is wonderful for your experience, that money is not a finite resource for you.
Yeah, wow. That must be nice.
Geez, that must be wonderful. Maybe they just need to put Trader's Tender on the cash shop so people can just buy Trader's Tender if they really want to, there. Now they can spend their unfinite resource to buy the finite resource and they can just be happy and move on with it. I don't know. It was a very weird thing to see and be like, guys, no, Trader's Tender, it to me is a, hey, you've contributed time. We're paying you in this Trader's Tender so that you can buy something cool and fun for you to enjoy and experience the game better with. So I'm glad that they're giving us more of it. I'm glad that they're doing discounts. I think that's really a smart way to go. And I think they could really turn up the dial on the amount that they give us. Now that we've gotten 2 years in and there's so many rewards out there, you already know that from hey, this amount of stuff we put out on the trading post every month, and this is how much tender people can earn. There's a lot of rewards out there that people have not been able to purchase yet just because there was never enough tender to do it. So by turning up that dial, you do help the people who are completionists, and you do help the people who don't, as necessarily play as often every month, but may have a month where they can play a lot more and get like 2,000 tender in a month to sort of help them be able to do something. So I think turning up that dial is nice. I think the extra 500 is good. I think they could turn that farther and go, hey, we're going to essentially double or triple the size of the bar that you're filling through doing activities. And if you really want to if you're taking 2 weeks off or whatever it is, and you want to run a ton of Mythic Plus and clear the raid a couple of times and kill world bosses and do all of the, laughing at critters and whatever it is, stuff that we want to do, you can do all of that, or, you know, do it during Love is in the Air. And so there's all the stuff for those events happening at the same time, or every month you want to really commit in that last week, that actual push week that they'd always do for Tender to sort of help people catch up. Like that to me should be an option for folks to sort of push that bar farther beyond the extra 500. I think would be a neat thing for an option for folks to do. And I think it's a good experiment if that's what they've been doing. I'm just saying it's been successful. Turn it up more.
Yeah. I don't see any kind of, I personally just don't see any kind of chilling effect on like how people interact with the trading post because of discounts or something. I just don't like.
I'm with you.
I think people want what they want off of the trading post. And I mean, I also know a lot of players who barely even pay attention to it. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to open the box this month. You know what I mean? Like there are players who are super hardcore collectors and the game for them is like completing all the things or what, you know, whatever it is. Like that's cool if that's the way that you approach it. But like you cannot apply that mentality to the player base broadly, because I think a lot of people are just like, oh, that looks neat. I want that. Oh, I don't like any of this stuff. Oh, maybe I'll freeze that one for next month. And it's not like they don't break out a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? Like they're just playing the game.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the blue posts that came out this past week. We have one in here about no licenses needed to drive, and drive being the undermined drive system. There's a new earnable customization vehicle and engaged in drive as you drift at high speed through the streets of Undermine. I'm really curious how the system's going to work, because there's some things about the raid that involve driving, and I'm wondering whether you can actually like defeat enemies by just driving over them with your vehicle, because that would be rather amusing inside of Undermine if that's something you could do. There's a cool acronym, needs a cool meaning. So the goblins haven't skimped on the meaning of drives, standing for dynamic, revolutionary improvements to vehicular experiences. I like that someone came up with that and was creative enough to do that. That's very cool. And players can earn the customizable G99 breakneck vehicle to use exclusively in their adventures within Undermine. You can push the boundaries of locomotion on roads, speeding through its causeways and byways at a higher rate than a ground mount can. And man, let's see what they actually sort of got into the new stuff here inside of this post. Shipping and handling. Nana Tula doesn't just set you up with a cool new ride. She has some jobs for you. So there's going to be quests associated with this. You can either see her directly to pick up the personal caddy caller, which lets you pick up jobs while you're out in the car, or start a job, or clock out from a job. They have a bracket 5. So right from the dash of your controls. I wonder if that clock out from a job 5 means 5 jobs. I assume is the cap on the jobs. Is that what they're getting at, Jason? With this? I think
it's actually the default hotkey.
Oh, hotkey. That's what they're telling you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know like why they put those.
That's just a weird thing to do. I was like, why would they put? Right.
Yeah, sometimes in these blogs they like put in default hotkeys for stuff, which is, I think, in my opinion, it's just unnecessary.
It's just weird. It's just a
like
weird
players
thing
are going to see it when they see it, or they're going to not have that hotkey set up that way anyway. But yeah, I think basically like it's a way that, you know, if you're on a job that you don't want, you can exit from the bar.
Yeah. And then of course they also have periodic surge pricing to earn bonus rewards for shipping and handling. So that's always an awkward thing when they're essentially rolling Uber and everything else into essentially the game, but that's what they're doing. So if you're someone who's always wanted to be an Uber driver, apparently there'll be surge pricing as well. So you can take advantage of completing shipping and handling jobs at the same time as other players. To schedule for your next surge pricing, open your quest log and select the events tab on the right side, and you can see when the next surge pricing is coming up. There's going to be a Need for Speed. There's a vendor that lets you test your driving skills for various courses. So this is your racetracks to try and zip around on, and there's like boosts to make you drive faster and keep pace with everybody else. So they'll be driving races, because how could you put a customizable speedy car in without having races? So sounds like overall with the system, it's a customizable car that you're getting that goes faster than any of the other ground mounts in the area, that allows you to complete Uber-based tasks for doing quests and whatnot. And you can do drag style races if that's something you want to do as well. So lots going on with the drive system in this blog post that they gave us.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's kind of just a new take or new iteration and stuff that's now familiar, like mount customization, right? We saw that come in with the beginning of Dragonflight, and then we saw it with the Delve mount in season 1. So, just changing the way your car looks or whatever. But there's also the level here of switching parts in and out. So, you get actually a different experience with the way the vehicle handles and stuff compared to, it's the purely cosmetic stuff we saw with the Drakes, for example. It does kind of set what I get the vibe here of is sort of like a crazy taxi type thing, but in the age of like the gig economy and like Uber and stuff like that. I'm definitely getting like crazy taxi vibes from reading this blog in terms of sort of like stuff you can do with your car in Undermined. So
yeah.
I haven't messed with it. I haven't been on PTR at all. It sounds like you unlock it pretty fast once you get out there, and then you have, then you'll be able to actually start customizing it with a little bit more questing. So shouldn't be too much of like a lift. It's more just like, okay, here's what this is. Like, here's how you do this, and then off you go. So it seems cool. I think it's one of the bigger swings they're taking with this patch is adding something this wacky into this game. But once they brought in dragon riding and Dragonflight, it's like, okay, well, obviously, like, we can have some really dynamic movement systems in the game. So I've been just pretty excited for it, honestly, since it got announced. And I wonder, like, if the the jobs that you can do while you're in the car, if that is like crazy taxi-esque, that could be like kind of a super fun thing to just do in some downtime or whatever. I mean, that game was super fun back in the day, and so if it's anything like that, I don't know, I think that could be a really fun addition that's just kind of a outdoor world, like time filler or whatever. Like, oh, let me go do some jobs while I'm waiting for people to log on.
Well, and I imagine there's no limitations on them eventually adding, essentially rocket packs that turn these into flying mounts somewhere down the line, if that's something you're wanting to still use, and you still want to use your race car mount at some point down the line. Maybe
that'd be cool.
You'll be able to use it outside of the zone and in fun ways that don't involve, oops, there's a river. Hey, now I, have to stop and get off my mount and switch mounts or whatever it is. Or it's just not as efficient as using, a Griffin. So you just use a Griffin whenever you're doing something, as opposed to using your really cool car you spend all this time customizing. So hopefully they do something with that down the line as well. Okay. There was another big blog post this past week. This was about Season 2 Mythic Plus updates, and there's a lot of information that they gave us, but there's definitely some highlight points we want to go through for you guys. Overall, they're rolling out some changes with Mythic Plus with the release of Season 2, and part of this is over the course of Season 1, the development team has received extensive feedback on Mythic Plus dungeons, much of which revolved around frustrations, especially trying to process through the system primarily in pickup groups. In other words, pugs. Hey, this is the recognition of everyone saying, I really dislike pugging Mythic Plus. Common areas of criticism have included a sense that players were faced with too many mechanics at once, that failure was too punishing, and that rewards felt insufficient for the challenge and effort required, which I think everyone who complained about pug groups would agree with on all of these levels. And it could be hard for players to find groups as a community that gravitated towards the meta specs to help cope with these difficulties. So they've already approached Season 2 rollout on PTR and ongoing tuning with an eye towards addressing mechanical issues. Cast times on critical enemy spells have been significantly increased. In other words, any spell that's like, oh my god, this is going to wipe you, or this is going to, kill somebody, or this is going to cause everyone to suffer in some large, significant way, are now obviously going to take longer to cast so that people can make sure that they're using an interrupt on them. Tank damage spikes were reduced in magnitude or given better telegraphs. The overall number of threats in an average pack of enemies has also been reduced and more. So they have gone in, listened to your feedback, and said, okay, we're going to make mechanics more obvious. They're going to be easier to stop, and you're going to be better at handling them, hopefully, based off of the changes that we're making. So they've also made improvements towards reducing the penalty of failing to finish a dungeon within the timer. In the Siren Owl content update, they understood that there was more to do in order to fully address the feedback they've been hearing. But now as they approach the second season, they have had a chance to make broader changes in Mythic Plus progression. As a factor that they see as an underlying cause of many of the cited issues is the lack of smooth, healthy reward progression in the current system, and the rewards are an essential part of the picture. The introduction of Delves kind of messed around with everything. Lots of players would enter the system at Mythic Plus 7 since they didn't need any more champion gear, and Mythic 7 was the first level to drop hero track items. However, often these players would be inexperienced in running Mythic Plus dungeons, and going into these particular dungeons at 7 is a very high difficulty. Dealing with a 77% bonus to enemy health and damage on top of Challenger's Peril, making deaths more costly, was never designed for an environment in which people were supposed to be learning mechanics for the first time. And yet, many players ended up doing just that. This heavily impacted the success rates that led to an inconsistency from group to group, and made many more players wary and more selective in filling their groups. Meanwhile, keys in the 2 to 6 range had a shallow applicant pool, especially in past the first weeks of the season. This meant that players who tried to even do lower level keys in order to build up the experience to succeed at plus 7 keys often had a hard time finding and forming groups, experiencing many of the same frustrations. So yeah, basically Delves came in and went, hey, you can get a bunch of champion gear. Here you go. Which made everyone go, oh, great. So since I'm champion geared, this means I should start at 7s, right? For Mythic Plus? No. That's not where you want to learn.
Like, probably not.
It's a terrible place to learn.
Yeah, if you're not like in a stable key environment, you don't want to start plugging at 7.
Yeah.
It's one thing if, your group, like, if you have a group of people that you do keys with every week and you go, okay, guys, what's our item level at? Yeah, let's try who's got a plus 7? Oh, let's try it. And then whatever happens. Fine. That's the best way to approach keys, in my opinion. But yeah, we heard a lot about it from all over the place early in this expansion. And people gearing up through the Delve system, coming out and trying to pug like mid-range keys and just not being able to play the dungeons.
Yeah.
I think that was a kind of a knock-on effect of adding Delves, that they really didn't have the overall reward structure set up to absorb.
Yeah. So they move on to say that looking ahead to season 2, their aim is to make changes to the Mythic Plus system to make it more rewarding from the outset and smooth out the difficulty progression so that each step feels approachable. To that end, the following changes are taking place. Baseline Mythic Plus, Mythic 0, dungeon rewards will now reward champion track gear from each boss with a weekly instance lockout. The health of dungeons, so that's important to note, with a weekly lockout. So this isn't something where you can go and run Mythic Zeros every week. The health and damage of enemies in those dungeons has increased to reflect the improved rewards, while keeping Mythic 0 an accessible point of entry for players beginning their Season 2 gearing journey and those looking to learn dungeons in a lower stakes environment. From Mythic 2 to Mythic 10, each new level will increase the health and damage of enemies by 7% down from the previous 10% per level. Scaling will remain at 10% for Mythic 11 and onwards. In other words, if you are running any of those dungeons, every mob will have 3% less health and 3% less damage, depending on from where they were previously for the keystone that you're running. Now, what I don't know is this 7% and then 7% in addition to that, in which case, if you're running a 7 now, it would essentially be doing 3% less for 2, plus 3% less for 3, plus 3% less for 4, plus 3% less for 5, plus 3% less for 6, plus 3% less for 7. So you'd be getting 15% less, essentially, overall health and damage in some sort of, compound interest style way. It could be substantially less damage and health than we previously saw, if that's how they're calculating it. If what they're doing is taking the current 7 and dropping it by 3%, and the current 6 and dropping that by 3% individual of each other, then that's only going to be a 3% drop. I don't know which one they're doing. I don't know if they're starting at 2 and working their way out, and it's only a 7% increase per key.
They've adjusted per rank scaling many times over the 8.5 years that Mythic Plus has been in there, and I think where they landed most recently with the 10% per rank, like it's easy to understand, but I did feel like when they initially brought it in that it was kind of punishing. It's like, oh, this is a lot of per rank scaling in addition to all the other stuff we're dealing with, right?
Yep.
And that was kind of where we ended up early on in Dragonflight, actually. Like, okay, you've increased the per rank scaling. I forget when it went to 10% per rank, if that was like late Shadowlands maybe, but like, okay, we have a bunch of new dungeons to learn, plus we have a new seasonal affix, plus we have all these other changes to the system. It's like part of the affix thing was to introduce variety into the system when you had a static dungeon pool for 2 entire years. We don't have that anymore. So, sometimes these changes, I think, work at like cross purposes to each other. And I definitely initially felt that when the per rank scaling went to what it has been, that felt tough. Like it was, I definitely noticed it,
Yep.
a 9 to 10, it was harder than it used to be for sure. This is going to make dungeons up through 12 is going to make it
Noticeably
significantly easier. Yeah, because it does compound per rank. So like it's going to be, that you're going to benefit from that reduction in per rank scaling every rank up until 11, where it goes back to 10, and then from then on it's 10% per rank.
Yeah, if that's how it's working, if that's how it's working, then the best way to think about it is they took all of the Mythic Plus health and damage levels beyond a 2 and just threw them out the window. They're gone. And they started at 2 again, and they went, okay, we're going to increase this number by 7%. That'll give us a new number. We're going to increase that number by 7%, and that's a 3. And we're going to give us a new number. We're going to increase that by 7%. That gives us a 4. That gives us a new number. And they just kept doing it that way, as opposed to going, hey, we have the totals for, 2 through 10. We're just going to reduce each individual step by 3%, right? That individually is a different thing. There's no compounding that happens there. So it's the way they choose to do that is a dramatic shift. It's just not becoming 3% easier at a 7. It's becoming 15% easier. It's a huge difference at a 7. So you'll feel this in a dramatic way. Like a 7 will feel like a 5, basically, is what you're talking about here, inside current system with current gearing. Now, that said, Mythic Plus is going to be tuned around Season 2 gear. So, we're going to be walking into that. And if you're someone who is normal raid geared going into Season 2, you might not be like, hey, yeah, I can hop into a 10 right away, because a 10 will still be thought of as content that might be, 10 or 15 eye levels above where you're currently geared because of the rewards that those are giving. We'll get into the rewards a little bit later. But before we do, they want to highlight here and say that the alternating cycle between Fortified and Tyrannical will move up from Mythic 4 to replace Challenger's Peril at 7, with the other one continuing to take effect at 10. So now 10s get Challenger's Peril, which is the, death punishment that takes place. 7s is where we start seeing the, hey, here's Tyrannical kicking in. Hey, here's Fortified kicking in, which means up until 7s, there's no Tyrannical or Fortified. You just don't deal with it. It's not a thing. You deal with just whatever the weekly affix is up until 7s. And once you hit 7, that's when you start seeing Tyrannical or Fortified kick in. And then at 10 is where you actually have the extra 15% or 15-second punishment that happens on deaths. So that's huge. And that's another great change that I'm loving to see.
It's not even that, because Peril doesn't come in until even higher. So Peril only comes in at they're basically getting rid of Peril and rolling it into Xal'atath's Guile, which is the thing where you don't get the buff, but then everything scales higher. So yeah,
Peril, so the other sorry, the wording they used was with the other one taking effect at 10, and what they're saying is Tyrannical and Fortified kick in at 10. Not Peril. Peril, you're right. Peril, they shifted even farther. That's the next part of the paragraph. They shifted that into above 12s. So, yeah, you won't even see that death punishment until you do 12s. Mm-hmm. Where you will see at 10s, Tyrannical and Fortified dungeons. Those will happen at 10s, but you'll only see just Tyrannical or just Fortified at 7 to 10. So that makes those keys easier. Yeah, you're right.
It's like the same thing we saw in terms of the Fort Tyrannical thing this season at 10. Just without the death timer penalty at 7. So 1 through, there's no 1. 2 through 6 becomes way easier and more rewarding compared to how it was previously, even now, and certainly at the outset of Season 1.
Yeah.
7 is where the challenge starts to ramp up a bit more. It should be a pretty. I mean, the cool thing about this for like practiced Keystone players is it should be pretty easy to get into the key range that you want to be doing. Which I think that was a big frustration I was having at the outset of season 1. Was not really the overall difficulty of the system, but it's like, dude, I got to do so many low
Raising
keys.
I get you.
To get my vault keys the way I want them, you know. And so this should make that a lot easier, and it should be a much smoother on ramp for people that want to get into the system in season 2, because you're dealing with the dungeons. Like, you have 6 ranks where all you're dealing with is the dungeons and 1 Xalatath affix.
Yeah, well, and then anything after 10 then becomes less punishing, because for those people who are running 10s previously, if you're a group that dies frequently on pulls, you're not getting that extra Challenger's Peril punishment that takes place. So all these keystones suddenly becomes dramatically less punishing from 7s on, because we don't have Challenger's Peril kicking in. So that's another huge, sort of alleviation that takes place. All right, so the next part is at 12, instead of an additional 10% increase in enemy health, Xalatath's Guile will now include the increased timer penalty for deaths that was formerly part of Challenger's Peril, as a replacement for the rotating bargaining affixes. Bargain affixes. My brain's in bargaining mode at the moment because I'm at the table on Wednesday. While the mechanic could feel overly punishing for groups still learning and progressing towards gear rewards, a focus on clean execution remains appropriate for the upper echelons of the system, and removing the extra 10% stats should make this transition into prestige tiers of the system feel like less of a wall. I'm glad they're calling them prestige tiers, because that's really what they are. So I'm glad to see that happening. Okay. Then we get a big old graph. And the graph here outlines a few key critical things. One is the health and damage increases overall for each keystone. It outlines what end of dungeon reward you're getting, and as far as the path that it's on, whether it's champion or hero, the Great Vault reward as far as which path those are on, and then which crests you're getting. So if you're running Mythic 0s, you're getting carved crests, right? Like right off the bat. If you're running Mythic 2s, you switch into Runed. So right away at a Mythic 2, you start earning champion tier gear with Runed crests, which means that you can actually upgrade that champion tier gear to its maximum item level off the Runed crest that you're getting. Because remember, previously, you could get it halfway, but then you needed Runed crests to actually push it up into the final levels of that gear. So you get the crests you need to finish the gear that you're getting at the end of run, which makes perfect sense to me, right? Okay, that happens between 2 all the way down to 6. Between 2 and 6, you're getting Runed crests. That switches to Gilded at 7. As far as your end of dungeon rewards, from 2 to 5, it's champion, and at 6, you get hero. So it then switches over to you starting to get that heroic level gear from end of reward at 6s. So your 7s, where, fortified and tyrannical kicks in, you are then starting to see where you get Gilded crest, which lets you push your hero gear to its maximum item level, and you're getting hero loot out of the end of dungeon chest. What putting hero gear at the end of dungeon chest out of 6s does is goes, hey, if you're someone who wants to push higher than 6s, we're giving you the gear you need to do that before you have to actually start doing the fortified and tyrannical rotating week buff that goes in. So you're doing something that's only 9% more difficult in health and damage between a 5 and a 6, but you're getting that extra chunk of gear item level that you could potentially use your Runed crest to bump hero gear up to where the maximum end of your champion gear is. And when you start doing 7s, here's Gilded crest to push that the rest of the way, which I think is great to see that happen. At 10s, we are seeing Mythic track out of your Great Vault. So 10s are still where you get Myth track out of your Great Vaults. You still will need to run 10s. You have that Tyrannical and Fortified kicking in. You're getting hero gear at stage 3 at the end of dungeon reward, which is the highest you'll see out of end of dungeon. You'll never see something higher than hero track 3. So 10, 11, and 12s are all hero track 3. And you're getting 16 Gilded crests. So at 7s, when you start getting Gilded crests, you're getting 10, which is a lot. That's a lot of Gilded crests for doing 7s, right? You get 16 for doing Mythic plus 10s. You get 20 for doing 12s. So if you're sort of thinking about, hey, how do I take an alt character and catch them up regularly? You could just run 7s a whole bunch of 7s. You get hero track gear that gets you gilded crest that you can use to upgrade your hero track gear or make your craftables. Your 636 currently, it'll be a higher item level, obviously, in season 2. Craftables will all be accessible to you by just running these dungeons. Currently, it only costs 60 to do that, right? So like this would be, if they don't change that number, you'd run 6 Mythic Pluses in a week and you could craft a piece of top tier gear for your character, which is huge for people being able to have access to this. And these aren't like, well, you can only get, X many gilded crests a week currently, but there will be a cap. I assume when we move into season 2, they'll go, it's 90 for the first week, or it's 120 for the first week, or whatever they choose to do for people who are doing it. But it'll mean in your first week, if you're running 7s, you can craft a piece of top tier gear if that's what you want to do with your first thing, which I think a lot of people will. They'll go, I want to recraft my staff, or I want to recraft my shield, or I want to recraft whatever it is to make it the next top tier. And that can happen in the first week. That's going to be super exciting for item level jumps for a lot of people. So keep your eyes open for that, because even if you're not, skilled enough or experienced enough with the system or geared enough or whatever it is to be doing 10s, you can just run 6 7s and get yourself hero gear out of your, Great Vault reward and enough gilded crest to make yourself something real snazzy. So keep that in mind. I think they did a really good, this is one of the better graphs they've given us for how this system works. And I'm just really glad with where they've placed things on it. I think they've done a good job with going, hey, you can now earn the crests you need to max out gear in an easier way to do it. And I think that's a wonderful sort of change they've got in there. All right. They move from this into a little post here that says, we are changing the rating requirement for the new Keystone Legend achievement being added in season 2, moving from 2850 to 3000. This is being done to keep it at a comparable level of challenge and prestige after changing the overall scaling. We will also be decoupling this achievement from the system that allows players to set a quote-unquote floor for the high-level keystones. Instead, once a player has finished all 8 seasonal dungeons at 12 within the timer, their keystones will no longer automatically de-level below 12. Once a player has timed all dungeons at Mythic 13, the floor will be 13, and so on for all keystones above 12. In other words, for people who want to push really high prestige Mythic Plus, they can choose to do that. And if you are doing 14s on a regular basis, clearing everything on 14, your keystone will not drop below 14. It will live there and not drop down. So you can continue to push until you get 15s, and then the whole system will move 15s. That's really neat. I like this system. This floor idea is cool. I need it at 10. That's what I want. I want 10s to do this, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, when they initially announced Keystone Legend, we talked about it a bunch on the show, and my whole thing was like, everybody wants these decay floors. Why have them just for people at this level? Why not put them everywhere? And I'm going to just continue to bang the drum for that. Now, again, this is the first time they've ever done this, right? So it's a new thing, and maybe that's the way to do it then, is you bring it in the most restrictive way, give it to the highest, level Keystone players, and see how it goes. And then you go, okay, well, maybe we expand it out. I think it would be great. Man, these are like massive sweeping changes to the Mythic Plus system in a lot of ways. I think in some ways, I mean, they're warranted because players kind of demanded them, right? Like we saw the kind of drop off in participation in season 1 War Within Mythic Dungeons compared to, recent seasons, comparable seasons like season 1 Dragonflight, whatever. And part of it certainly is there's more ways to play the game, and the delves are probably siphoning off some of the audience and some people's attention. I can't tell you that I found season 1 to be significantly difficult compared to other Mythic Plus seasons. I blasted through Keystone Master, Keystone Hero, teleports. Season 1 is usually the hardest season of the expansion because you're gearing up. You're learning so much about all the new stuff with your classes. You're learning the whole group dynamics of a new environment. It's the least powerful your character's going to be. It's the least tuned the game ever is. So usually season 1 is like, I barely made it. I got stuff done. This was not like that for me. And now granted, I play with a pretty dedicated group of people, and we're used to playing with each other, and we take it seriously. So like, that's certainly beneficial, but also like, I always do that. And season 1 Dragonflight was way harder in my opinion. Season 1 Shadowlands was significantly harder than this season was, in my opinion. So, I think part of it is just like players just have no patience with stuff, and they have other options. There's other games to play. So this is maybe just the inflection point where it's like the devs have to do something to keep people interested in the mode. I think season 2 War Within Mythic Plus is going to be significantly easier as a result of these changes. The scaling is so much lower. The expectations for execution are so much lower, like all the way up to 10, really. So players who have any interest in getting the titles and mounts and teleports should be able to do that with some dedication. I think the reworked reward structure is a boon, and also going straight into season 2 with the changes they made with like crest acquisition in place and improved from mid season 1 is great. I do think, since Mythic Plus has been introduced, it's really badly stepped on the positioning of Heroic Raid in the overall sort of pecking order of the game. And at this point, I look at this and I go, like, Heroic rating is just like incorrect. If that's like what your rating focus is, like, why? Just do +6s. And I don't think it should be like that. Like, yes, there are the cantrip items and there's trinkets and there's stuff that has a cool effects in raid, but what are the odds that you actually pull one of those? They're not great versus just slamming +6s and above and kidding your character out. And obviously working your way up the system and getting into 10 so you can get your myth track stuff, but you're not going to get any myth track stuff from Heroic Raid ever. So I as a raid leader, I continue to have concerns about this. I think just stepping on Heroic Raid as sort of a viable mode, like, really significantly. And here's my question: where is this kind of radical reconfiguration of Mythic Raid? Like, when is that coming? When are we getting that relief that, yes, it's not as bad as it was for teams trying to approach Mythic as it was in Shadowlands, let's say. But like, if this is what Mythic Plus can be like in terms of what's expected for the rewards that it dishes out, how come Mythic Raid is this kind of unicorn among all other systems in the game, all other ways to play and earn rewards, Keystone Dungeons, PvP, Delves, everything else? Mythic Raid is like untouchable. Yes, it's suffering. Yes, the people who do it have to suffer through hundreds of holes.
Here's the thing. I hear entirely what you're saying. The point I would take is, why is Mythic Raid still something that's suffering? If what you're doing is making Heroic Raid gear this accessible, like this easy for people to sort of hop in and pick up and get this gear and gear their characters to be at Heroic gear item level while they're doing Heroic Raid, why is Mythic Raid still so inaccessible in its difficulty and punishment and what's happening with that content? Why is it that you're not going, hey, okay, we understand that people who used to Heroic Raid really liked the challenge and felt that getting that gear was really rewarding. What we've done is made Heroic Raid substantially more accessible, so people who did do those challenges inside Heroic now are finding this not enough of a challenge. But they go to Mythic and then they get their butts handed to them because Mythic is so hard. So why are we not scaling back how difficult Mythic content is so that the Heroic Raiders who wanted to raid 3 nights a week, doing Heroic content, trying to clear it for 3 or 4 months out of a patch cycle, aren't just going into Mythic content? They aren't clearing their Heroic stuff and going into Mythic content and doing Mythic content and not hitting bosses that take 300 pulls to kill. That shouldn't be happening. Like, there shouldn't be a boss, in my opinion, there should not be a boss in the game at this stage that people are taking that long to kill. There just shouldn't be. It's a design flaw. It is a flaw in that situation. So if you have the item level to be close to relevant to that content, there shouldn't be bosses that are so complicated mechanically that are taking that long to kill. There just shouldn't be, if this is the design direction you're heading. The design direction they're heading is, we're making Heroic almost obsolete based off of a gear drive for folks to go out and do it. They're like, well, there might be a specific trinket they want. Their tier set they can get from catalyzing stuff. So like, it's nice to get a bit sooner, but it's not a super big reward. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot out of Heroic Raid that is a draw to continue farming for these people, which means they need somewhere to go. Heroic Raiders need somewhere to go, and that place is Mythic Raid. And if Mythic Raid is still such a dramatic jump in how punishing it is from Heroic, that Heroic Raiders can't go into it and be successful in what they're doing, then there's a problem with Mythic Raid. That's where we're at.
Right.
So,
yeah. I agree. Like, I just think what I'm hoping, I guess, is that that's the next domino to fall, right? Like, Delves were a big part, I feel like, of them restructuring this, because you had all of these players who had sort of graduated from a power perspective out of Mythic 1 through 6 Keystones, and then were trying to enter the system at 7 and failing miserably and creating bad experiences for themselves and the people that they were playing with. So now you're going to have a situation where, I mean, more so than ever, Mythic Keystones are going to completely step on the space that Heroic Raid occupies. So hopefully that means that their reaction to that is to continue to dial Mythic Raid back. I mean, Nerebar Palace is easier than maybe some recent Mythic Raids that we've seen. But you still have these super inaccessible brick walls that, like, you don't experience anywhere else in raiding, right? Like, you get those 4 bosses down in Nerebar, and then you have this massive wall to climb that is unlike anything else you experience earlier in the raiding system. And you're not going to encounter that in Keystone dungeons, at least through any part of the system that gives you a tangible reward, right? Like, you could do 14s, 15s, 18s if you want to. It doesn't give you anything other than the prestige of having done it. Whereas in raiding, that concept doesn't really apply. It's a binary question of, like, did you kill the boss or not, right? So, that is my, like, looking at this, it's like, this is the most Keystone dungeons have ever stepped on Heroic raiding heading into Season 2. And hopefully that means that at some point sooner than later, that Mythic Raid gets reconfigured accordingly, and that we just sort of have, like, an overall lower ceiling of difficulty for relevant content throughout the entire game. I think players would welcome that in general. Like, it's cool to have, difficult raiding that requires a lot of coordination and a lot of dedication, and it's the race to world first is like a fun thing, but if a lot of times it feels like some of these bosses are designed as stunts for those teams to clear, and then they don't get nerfed fast enough on live for a regular group of players to do, and that creates all kinds of other downstream effects for raiders throughout the system. So, I mean, overall, these are great changes to Mythic Plus entirely. Like, if anything, I feel like they're going too far. Like, this might be a little too easy when it all comes out in the wash. Giving hero track gear at Mythic Plus 6 might be a little too generous, but, I guess it's worth a shot. I mean, I think you have to really reestablish people's trust in the system and interest in the system after some of the stuff that happened in Season 1. You have to give them incentives to check it out again, and hopefully you land it better with tuning and the overall balance of rewards and stuff like that. So they're taking a big swing, and this is going to be way easier and way more generous for the time you put in. And so what does that mean for the rest of the overall landscape of the game, right? If people are just slamming 7s all day or whatever, and it's smooth sailing, and they're gilded capped, and all their crafting stuff is done, and they got 4-piece and they're kitted out, like, okay, well then
sounds like BFA you just described.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Like,
yeah,
right?
like it's sort of those, like, older days of Mythic Plus, right? But then it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do Heroic Raid. This is the same entry point problem, right? That you have from Delves coming into Mythic Plus 7 this season. Now it's like, okay, well, I'm very well versed in doing my Mythic 9s. I'm totally done with that. Well, it doesn't look like there's anything in the Heroic Raid that's interesting to me. So how do I get into Mythic Plus? But, like, WoW players don't expect to be able to pug into Mythic Raid, right? Like, Heroic may be more or less puggable at certain points in time, and certain people may want to do it, or it's considered puggable or whatever. Mythic is just like, no, they get to have that. We're not concerned about pugs entering that space. That's for those other players, Everything else, though, must be bent to our desires and tastes and ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really weird. Like, I don't know why Mythic Raid gets its own little bubble of like, the rest of the game cannot impact this. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's Mythic. I should be able to do Mythic plus whatever I want to rank in a pug and succeed and be rewarded. But I would never even think of, trying to transfer that into the Mythic Raid system. That's its own thing. It's totally sacred and separate from the rest of this. I don't understand why that mentality exists.
I mean, I kind of understand that it exists in the sense that the raid content has always been, and this is something Ian talked about ages ago, that group content in World of Warcraft, like large group content, should always be its own protected thing because it's so much more difficult to do. Which is why I feel like the way you're talking about Mythic Plus is intruding into the heroic space and devaluing the rewards for doing large group content for heroic raiding, which is larger than Mythic, raiding. FYI, it's like 30 people in a lot of cases. Is something where you're going, okay, well, if you're devaluing that, where is the balancing point for Mythic content? You can't go, hey, we're devaluing heroic raid content, but we're not giving heroic raiders a place to go. That's weird to me, because at this point, all the raiders who are doing heroic stuff 3 nights a week are probably geared in heroic gear, at least, if not Mythic gear in a lot of cases. And when they walk into Mythic Raid, they're hitting bosses and walls that take them hundreds of pulls to kill. And it takes them hundreds of pulls because they aren't playing at the experience level or at the needed attention span or the needed preparation or whatever it is that Mythic Raiders raid at. They don't put the effort into the game. They don't think about the game the same way. All those things apply. But is that really how this should work? Should we really leave heroic raiders with nowhere to go? Or should we look at Mythic content and go, this is probably too high. We probably don't need 5 overlapping mechanics that if anything goes wrong, someone dies. We probably don't need that, right? Maybe it should be one mechanic that 3 people have to succeed at. And if those 3 succeed at it, everything's fine. If 2 do, there's slight punishment. If 1 does, there's slightly more punishment. If no one does this mechanic, it's a wipe. Maybe that's the level of extremity we should be looking at. Like, I don't know. It's that consideration of, you look at some of the bosses and yeah, it's one person messes up. Sorry. All right, start again. And that's still how Mythic raiding is. There's still many mechanics that are that way of, oops, someone messed up. Okay, start over. And you're like, okay, well, is that where this should be at? Because that's not where heroic raiders are raiding at, but you've completely devalued heroic raid content for rewards. So maybe you should look at Mythic and maybe you should scale back what's going on in Mythic raids. That's just where, as a Mythic raider, I'm at. I like challenging Mythic content. And I know a lot of people on my raid team would be like, what do you mean you want them to make Mythic raid easier? This last tier was super easy. And you're like, sure. For those of us who are mindset on this is what Mythic raiding is. For those of us who are like, yeah, I recognize that I can spend 250 or 300 pulls on a final boss and that's acceptable. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is not the mindset of the majority of players. That is not the mindset of heroic raiders. That probably shouldn't be where content is at if we are devaluing the content that those people are doing to the point where they're going, what's the point of even doing this content? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that also raises a point of like, how do you get people into the Mythic raiding space, right? Like, you can't run Mythic raids without players, so they have to be accessible to enough players to want to do them. And it's like, I mean,
sure.
The game obviously ebbs and flows, but it's sort of, in terms of like overall rating metrics and people participating, it just trends down farther and farther over time. So, is there opportunity there? Like, is it worth, if you cut back the overall kind of complexity of Mythic raid, or the overall difficulty tuning, and then influenced a bunch of people to check out the mode and to invest more time in it, then is that a fair trade-off? And I mean, I think it's obviously good for the overall health of the game, but I think they've been overshooting it, and adding the unique items, the cantrips, and adding cool trinkets and stuff to raid has helped out, to heroic raid has helped out over the years, but I think this is going to take it to a completely different level where it's like, well, you should just be doing keystones if you want to make your character stronger. So,
yeah,
we'll see. I mean, we've been on this for a while
We
now,
have,
but really
yeah.
the TLDR for me is like, these are incredible changes that's going to make season 2 very easy and lucrative for many players. And then, that's what I want from Blizzard is the next step. Like, okay, like we got Delves kind of in a spot where you can take it as far as you want to go, and you can get like Gilded Crests, and if you're doing 11s in Delves in season 2, you can really power up your tune through solo content in a way that you've never been able to before.
Yep.
Mythic Plus is going to be super accessible with a nice on-ramp and a ton of rewards, lower overall difficulty curve, and a great way to get your character to the highest levels of gear. Great. What's the other part of PvE? Oh yeah, that rating stuff. Well, where does that go? And that, that it might just, I don't think we'll get a post like this about raid difficulty and scaling and complexity and design goals. I don't think we're going to see that. So the proof is going to be in the pudding with the Undermine raid, and we'll go from there. But it's weird for me to like read this and like these are all great changes, but I just go, ugh. Well, they're making this too easy for the way I approach Mythic Plus, and they're ruining my heroic rating. So it's like a weird thing for me personally, but I think these are good things to do. I think they should.
I think it's the right direction. I agree with you that there's just one more domino that they haven't addressed yet. That's the problem. And then it's addressing the rating domino of like, okay, we've addressed the solo player, we've addressed the small group content, now let's address the large group content. They just haven't done it yet. So I don't know if we are going to get something like this. I feel like we won't. I feel like it'll be something where we probably go into season 2, people find it very easy to gear up, which is probably a good thing. They find that the raid content is very simple to get through on heroic difficulty, and then Mythic is the stone wall, and then it becomes a season 3 thing of whether or not they choose to address that or how they choose to address it, whether it's scaling back gearing or it's actually looking at that last domino of Mythic raid and going, we should make this more accessible and drop this back down. And if this means that we lose, basically the Wrist World First takes 4 days to complete or 3 days to complete and people are done it and it's over, then I think that's an acceptable thing. I don't think that's a problem. If it means that a raid team like mine that raids 2 days a week, 6 hours a week and does Mythic, and we're able to essentially clear that Mythic content in a month and a half or 2 months, as opposed to going towards 3, I think that's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's a bad thing to be completed on that content and into farm and spending your time doing something else in World of Warcraft or playing one of the many other versions of World of Warcraft that are out there with your time that you have on your sub. I don't think that's a bad thing. So I'll be curious to see what they choose to do. Okay. One last thing to mention here, because this ties into last week's episode, because we ended off last week's episode with Jason going on a bit of a Prot Warrior rant. And there was a reason why we did this. And we did this because often it results in posts like this, Jason.
Yes, I'm sure that my little indulgence on last week's episode is the reason why we got this update. So thank you, WoW team. And but no, we got a post from Kyvax. I think it was Friday. It was just a couple days ago. And I'm just going to read the meat of what he writes here. As noted previously, our goal with the Protection Warrior changes is to bring the APM requirement of the spec down to reduce the performance gap the high APM creates. We initially made significant adjustments to both burst and sustained rage generation, as well as shield slam resets via Devastator and Strategist. We've since made adjustments as we fix bugs and evaluate the actual outcome of the changes versus our expectations. Now that most of the dust has settled, and man, there was a lot of dust, we feel that we overshot the initial nerf to shield slam reset chance. In next week's PTR build, it will be increased to 25%. After playing with this change, we feel that this gets Protection Warrior to where we want it to be, an active and engaging playstyle without the rotation being dominated by too frequent shield slam resets. So, there was a big post last week that just sort of outlined like what their goals were for Prot Warrior, but without really addressing the elephant in the room, which is that it sucks on 11.1 in the PTR build that was out there. This might seem like a relatively minor quibble here, but partially reverting this nerf to Strategist this is what we're really talking about here. Strategist is the thing that gives Shield Slam a chance to reset based on Devastate or being applied through auto attacks with the Devastator talent, which is basically default. it was 30%. It's been 30% for a long time. They were like, hey, what if we cut it to 20%, which doesn't sound like a big number change, but that's a 33% nerf to how much your Shield Slam resets. Shield Slam is a very important offensive, defensive, and throughput related ability. So reverting half that nerf makes it like a 16%, 17% nerf to the chance, which is a lot better. They have also brought in some other improvements. Like we've gotten buffs. We got compensatory buffs to make up for the strategist nerf. And now half of the strategist nerf is getting reverted, but we'll see what other changes they make. I think this is good. Like this is a lot better. It would be great if we never nerfed strategist, but let's cut it down slightly instead of cutting it in half. Cutting a third off of it.
Yeah.
And I think you can still have. Now, yes, there will be more room to like push revenge and have it feel good, right? To like spend a GCD on that, especially with some of the buffs we've seen to revenge along the way. It's going to be a bit of a different landscape, but I think clawing back some of that strategist nerf was key. So I was glad to see this come through. I'm feeling a bit less doom and gloom about it, and I think it's going to. What they wanted to do, too, I think, was highlight some talents that they brought in with the Dragonflight class reworks that sort of never really found their way into what Prot was doing. So if this opens up for some different builds and some different things to consider, some different playstyles, like I'm all for that. I think we don't get as much of that as we used to get years ago, where it was like, hey, you have a new tier set this season. You have a new playstyle. Go figure it out, right? That was like Legion, and I thought that was really cool. We don't see that as much in the current landscape. So having something to shake up some of these talents that maybe are a little moldy or haven't worked their way into builds as much, I'm up for it. I'm open to it. I like that variety or approaching things in a different way every once in a while. So we'll see how that goes. I'm glad that they listened to the feedback and that they're moving it around because I want a Shield Slam. It feels good. It's a good button to push. It's kind of our whole thing. And but we can have a little bit more room to breathe in the overall rotation and with the APM requirements without losing so many Shield Slams and so much rage generation, so many punishment stacks, et cetera, all the attendant stuff that comes with you're slamming less, right? It's like, it's good you're not pushing the button as much. It's good for your hands. It's good to avoid RSIs, right? But when it means that your spec is not functioning as well, it's like we gotta put the pie back together somehow. You can't just cut that slice out and then charge me for the whole pie, right? So
I hear you.
We'll see. I mean, obviously everything with class design is always a work in progress, but feeling a bit better after this update from Kyvax this week.
Yeah, it definitely means they're paying attention to it, so that's good. All right. With that, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. This week, I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Bradley, Dustin, James, Kapawi, Cobra, Max, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you give, and a big special shout out to all of our patrons, both past and present. Thank you so much for all that you've given or give towards the show and help us keep these episodes online and running every week. And we're looking forward to continuing to do a lot more in 2025. If you want to join the Patreon and support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/thestartingzone and pop in there as a patron if you like it, whatever tier is comfortable for you. And there's some changes coming up with Patreon even where I think it's going to start to become a monthly charge as opposed to per episode charge. So we have to look at what that looks like and a bunch of things because they have to rework a bunch of their back end. And it's changing how we do things. And so we'll be changing how we do things. And there'll be some differences that happen. We'll keep you informed. But in general, we just want to say thanks very much, patrons, for all that you've done over the years to support us. And we're looking forward to continuing to making more shows and meeting more patrons. We have no new patrons this week, but hopefully we meet a few new ones soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, patrons, for everything you've contributed to the show over the years. It really does mean a lot, and it's helped us keep the show on track this whole time. We couldn't do it without you for real. So thanks for the support. And the thing about the Patreon changes is that, Patreon's marketplaces and business partners really do not like the per per creation charge business model. And we really like it because it means that, we're charging you for a thing that we produced. We're not charging you for the future promise of producing a thing. I think it's just the most fair way to do it for a podcast like ours. And that's why we've been with that model, and it's worked really well for us over the years. So it's unfortunate these things happen. I mean, Patreon is still kind of like the best way to directly support somebody who's doing a thing that you believe in. And even though it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. I mean, there are Patreons that, that I subscribe to because I believe in the people creating them, and we all kind of wish there was just a better way to do this, but this is where we ended up. So we do appreciate all of you who contribute to the show, and we're going to try to just figure out the best way to keep that fair for everybody moving into the future.
Yeah, exactly. All right. If you folks have enjoyed this episode, another thing you can do is go over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcast, and leave us a 5-star. We read them here live on the show, and we appreciate all those folks who do it. It helps move us up those charts and more people find our show. That's going to wrap up episode 669 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out your show notes for the episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast, and leave us some feedback over there. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback, another great way to do it is to email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter or Blue Sky at The Starting Zone or thestartingzone.bluesky. Or you can hop over to our Discord server, and that's thestartingzone.com/Discord. And you can click on the link there and hop into Discord and chat with folks over there. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone, where we have shirts and mugs and stickers and that kind of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, or you can find me over on Blue Sky. It's jlucas.bsky.social over there. I keep up with both sites pretty regularly, but I mostly just post stuff on Blue Sky. So if you want to see whatever is going through my head throughout the day or whatever, Blue Sky is the place to find me, but you come say hi on either. Video channels are at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Have been dormant since the Winter Veil giveaway now it's 2 months ago, but we'll get them going again once season 2 starts spinning up. I'm not going to, turn on stream for half an hour to go kill some pointless heroic bosses that we've killed 50 times. But the video channels do exist. We will be streaming, raids and dungeons and stuff once season 2 kicks up, usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Sundays evening Eastern time US over there.
Yeah, if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter, but not too often these days. Spencer_Downey over there. If you're trying to find me primarily, though, you can go over to Blue Sky at spencerhd.bluesky.social. And that's the platform that I'm using most often. It's necessary to have a Twitter account at the moment, but I just don't post there as frequently as I do over on Blue Sky. So be sure you go over to Blue Sky at spencerhd.bluesky.social. Follow me over there. I'm also over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD and on YouTube at youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.